Part 13. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 126. Chapter 123 Recruiting Death Hank. I took a chartered flight to Prussia and went all the way to Berlin. One of Luo Guang's purposes when he came here was to find someone, and his name was Hank. Knocking on the wooden door of the apartment in front of him, Luo Guang quietly waited for the other party's reaction. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. At this time, Hank had taken off his military uniform, but he was still the warrior known as the God of Death. In the past, no one had ever looked for him. When Hank heard the knock on the door, his first reaction was to pick up his hand and put it in the gap on the side of the sofa. G22 pistol. This G22 pistol is based on the G17 pistol design and uses 0.40-inch S/U0026W pistol bullets. Compared with 9mm pistol bullets, its power and stopping effect are better. The barrel is 114mm long, but has a rifling pitch of 400mm, making it a good close-range pistol. Hank's room was specially installed with a carpet on the floor that could reduce the sound of footsteps, so Hank walked behind the peephole in a silent state and saw the man outside the door. Hank thought quickly. He didn't know the man outside the door, nor was he the landlord of the apartment. However, the man outside the door appeared so frankly in the death funnel area outside the door. This made Hank judge that the man outside the door should not be his enemy. Who? Hank lowered his voice and asked. I want to talk to you about Umbrella Company. Luo Guang knew that Hank didn't like to beat around the bush, so he told him the purpose of his visit directly. Hank tightened his grip on the pistol and asked, What do you mean? Since the other party came to the door, they must have investigated his identity, so Hank did not pretend not to know Umbrella Company. Hank, I know your identity, and I also know that you don't know what Umbrella is doing secretly. Luo Guang once chatted with Hank about many things on Lotford Island and inquired from the sidelines. Knowing that Hank is not a bad person, Hank was silent. He somewhat understood what the other party meant, but Umbrella was his main employer after all, so he was used to following orders and didn't know what to do at this time. Finally, Hank opened the door and let Luo Guang walk in. Your name? Hank's G22 pistol was pressed against Luo Guang's waist, but Luo Guang, who saw the model of the gun, knew that the weapon could not penetrate his hardened armor, so Luo Guang ignored it and walked to the sofa without saying a word. He sat down politely and then said, You can call me Wu Song. The purpose of Luo Guang's trip was to defeat the Big Tiger Umbrella Company, so his pseudonym was the same as Wu Song. The two sat opposite each other without speaking. At this moment, Luo Guang observed Hank in front of him. He was a middle-aged man with a slightly stout body, but he looked stronger. Unfortunately, his face was a popular one. Luo Guang used to I wonder if it's because of this face that Hank always wears that gas mask. What on earth do you want to talk to me about? Hank, who looked much more decadent than before, didn't want the other party to stay for a long time, so he spoke first. Luo Guang said, What do you think of what Umbrella is doing in Raccoon City? No opinion, I'm just a soldier, obeying the orders of my superiors to perform a few tasks. Luo Guang's question reminded Hank of what researcher Greg said. In the end, Hank chose not to believe what researcher Greg said, but after he saw the photos and videos released by Alyssa and what she said on TV, he realized what the Umbrella Company he had been working for was doing secretly. The thing is true. When you were performing your mission, an accident occurred, which caused the T-virus to leak into the sewers and infect those rats and other creatures. In the end, it was out of control. When the number of people infected with the T-virus reached a certain number, the biohazard in Raccoon City would begin again. I can't hold it back anymore. Luo Guang's words put the blame for Raccoon City's destruction on Hank's head. Hank's expression changed and he felt uneasy. After thinking about Luo Guang's words, he said, No, before we carried out the mission, there had been biochemical incidents in the Aclay Mountains and other places, and there were already eyewitness reports. But the large-scale infection occurred after you performed your mission. Luo Guang did not panic because of the other party's rebuttal, and said calmly. Hank shook his head and said that he did not want to argue on this issue, which meant that he told Luo Guang that he had to make his own judgment. If you want me to testify against the company, then I'm sorry. I have quit Umbrella Company and don't want to get involved in this whirlpool again. After experiencing another incident where all his teammates were wiped out, Hank was already disheartened. Coupled with the inhumanity of Umbrella's secret work, Hank, who was exhausted physically and mentally, left Umbrella without even reporting the mission. Company. Quit? Running away is the right thing to do, right? Whatever you say. Hank said nothing, as if he was following you. Luo Guang knew that all the recruits placed under Hank by organization throw them on the battlefield like this. What do you mean? Hank's eyes were filled with anger. He felt that Luo Guang was insinuating that he had survived alone again, just like others who said that they survived by betraying their teammates. Luo Guang started to make up a story based on the intelligence he got from Organization X, but at this time he still needed to confirm some things. There was another emergency in your last mission. According to Organization X's plan, this emergency should separate Hank from everyone except Hank, and then Hank would see his targets being killed one by one in the monitoring room. Yes, it was originally just a simple ancient civilization investigation mission, and then we were attacked by strange soldiers there, and everyone else died. Luo Guang's words made Hank think that Luo Guang already knew the content of their mission, and since he had already left the company, Hank did not keep it secret and said it directly. Strange soldiers. Luo Guang had seen the mission planned by Organization X, and there would be no humanoid creatures in that mission. Hank was used to speaking in short sentences. Seeing Luo Guang's slightly strange expression, he realized that he had omitted a lot of things and explained again. Oh, it's like this, our plane had a problem when it flew to a forest, and then the plane crashed. Luo Guang found that Hank, who talked about the plane crash lightly, was also a vehicle killer. Although our compass failed at that time, we did not lose our way by relying on the position of the sun, and we walked towards the original destination. That's just a heavy-duty raid, which is not a difficult task for you. Luo Guang nodded, thinking that something might have gone wrong on the way. As Luo Guang expected, the strange soldiers mentioned by Hank appeared on their way forward. Hank said with lingering fear, those soldiers held spears or bows and arrows in their hands. Wait, spears and bows and arrows? Are they from primitive tribes? Luo Guang interrupted. But Hank shook his head to deny Luo Guang's words, saying, they are not living people. Zombie soldiers, Luo Guang thought, is this another biological weapon made by someone? It's a mummy soldier. Luo Guang didn't say anything, looking like you're kidding. Hank smiled bitterly, knowing that it was hard for people to believe what he said, but he didn't explain it again, and it couldn't be explained. This was also the direct reason why Hank left Umbrella Corporation directly. Luo Guang's face returned to normal, but he was thinking frantically in his mind. He originally wanted to blame Umbrella for the death of Hank's teammates, but after the other party said that, he couldn't just say that those mummies were zombies of Umbrella, and it was hard to prove it. Can those mummy soldiers be killed? How did you leave in the end? Bullets are useless to them, and hitting their heads only makes them stagger a few steps. We can only keep running away and break out of the encirclement of the mummy soldiers. In the end, only I escaped the encirclement. As long as we leave the forest over there, the mummy zombies can't chase us. Now I think it should be that the magnetic field in that area is relatively strong, causing problems with electronic equipment, so we crashed. Hank didn't know what was going on at the time, but not long after he came to his senses, he guessed what was going on, and he could only say that he was really unlucky and encountered such a thing. This information can probably be sold to the X organization, so that they can send people from the periphery to explore the way. Although he didn't find a good reason to recruit Death Hank, Luo Guang still gained something from this trip. My main purpose of coming here is actually to ask you to work for us to fight against the biochemical crisis in the world. Luo Guang finally said his purpose, and finally did his best and left it to fate. Hank actually had a hunch that Wusong in front of him wanted to recruit him, but he really didn't have such thoughts at this time. Thank you for valuing me, but I don't want to care about these things anymore. There is not much information about Death Hank in the game, so Luo Guang is not good at persuading him based on his personality, but people who have the same experience as Hank can be used as reference objects. So Luo Guang made a final effort, stood up and was about to leave, saying, I understand your feelings. Actually, Hank, you just can't get over yourself. Think about how your teammates will feel when they see their respected captain like this. I hope you can get over it one day. It is indeed as Luo Guang said, Hank can't get over himself, even if those brothers once said on their deathbed that they did not blame their captain, but in the end, Hank has to figure this out by himself. After Luo Guang finished speaking, he put a note with a phone number on the table in front of the sofa and turned to leave the apartment. Not long after leaving the apartment, Luo Guang found that there were two tails following him. Is it someone from Umbrella? Is there someone monitoring Hank's room? The first suspect was Umbrella. When he and Hank were chatting in the house, the curtains of the windows in the room were all drawn, and when Luo Guang stood at Hank's door, there was no sound from other rooms. Could it be the surveillance camera in the corridor of the apartment? Luo Guang quickly determined the means by which the other party monitored Hank. Although two people were following him, Luo Guang was not worried and had no plans to get rid of them for the time being. He took them to a restaurant with luxurious decoration, extremely expensive prices but not enough food. Luo Guang saw the tangled expressions on the faces of the two people behind him through the glass and laughed in his heart. Looking at the stalker sitting behind him on the right, Luo was eating while waiting for the other party to make the next move, or to confirm his identity. Wusong's identity was created by Luo Guang using the intelligence of the X organization to find those who made identities. Those who made the certificates on the list all had official backgrounds in the Lighthouse country, but they did not belong to the X organization. Although the fees were extremely high, the certificates made by those people were not fake, but valid certificates that could withstand verification. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. At this time, Wusong's appearance and figure were quite different from Luo Guang's own. This was not achieved through makeup, but a real change in his body. Through the reflection of the silver tableware, Luo Guang saw the stalker with an Asian face behind him whispering. Is the identity confirmed? Looking at the small piece of beef on the plate in front of him, one of the stalkers looked very confused and asked. It's confirmed, a rich man named Wusong, but we can't find out how he got rich. You mean that guy's background is problematic? Although Luo Guang's ID is real and his background information can be made, it is too difficult for the person who made the ID to completely fabricate a person's decades of life experience. Therefore, as long as someone is willing to investigate Wusong's background, it will sooner or later be found that Wusong's identity is problematic. Not sure. Tracker A shook his head and said, who knows if that guy is the illegitimate son of a rich man. Stalker B denied, but what would that kind of person talk to the target about? And how did he know the target's location? Who knows, what order was given from above? In order to answer the other party's words, Tracker B made a gesture of tightening his neck with a rope under the table. Well, I'll get the money for this meal back from him. Tracker A smiled and said with his head down. Okay, contact support, and get a few more people to help. Don't let this guy run away. Luo Guang knows a little lip reading, but it is limited to Chinese, and the two people behind him are not speaking Chinese, so Luo Guang returns empty-handed and doesn't know what the other party talked about. But Luo Guang saw that the last look they gave him was full of greed. Thinking that the other party was probably ready to take action, Luo Guang was not in a hurry to leave. After dinner, he slowly tasted a bottle of red wine produced by Mouton Rothschild Winery before paying the bill and leaving. You actually used this method to lead me into the alley. Luo Guang heard a woman's cry for help from the alley, but the cry for help was not real. In order to let a specific person hear it, the volume was deliberately lowered. Luo Guang shook his head and was about to leave. He was not the kind of fool who would run into an empty place by himself, but someone blocked Luo Guang's way. There were people blocking the road in front, behind and on the left, leaving only the way to enter the alley, which meant to invite someone into a trap. When other passers-by saw this, they immediately walked around. No one wanted to help Luo Guang, an Asian man. Since the other party did this, Luo Guang had to teach them what it meant to not die if you don't commit suicide. I don't know if it's because I often listen to songs and write words, my ears are infected with fungus. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 127. Chapter 124. Chuck Gang. 6 people, you really think highly of me. Luo Guang stood sideways to prevent being attacked, looking at the 5 men and 1 woman in front and behind, without any fear, and said with a smile. Who are you? Why did you go to find that poor guy? One of them seemed to be the leader of them. He had been waiting for Luo Guang in the alley and said in English. Luo Guang heard the other person's English accent, sounding like someone from the chrysanthemum country, and replied, I am a rich man, not the kind of person who needs to report to the higher UPS at the door with a tangled face when going to a restaurant to eat. Although Luo Guang was not a rich man before he crossed over, and did not know what kind of life those upper-class rich people lived, this did not prevent Luo Guang from mocking the people in front of him. The 2 people who shared the small piece of beef in the restaurant changed their expressions when they heard Luo Guang's words, and were about to raise their fists to beat Luo Guang, but they were stopped by the people next to them. Haha, it seems that you, a rich man, don't know what it means to keep your money private. You carry so much money outside without a bodyguard. One of them wanted to show off his eloquence and said sarcastically. However, the person in charge now looked serious and said, did you notice that someone is following you? The 2 people who were following Luo Guang paused and looked at their eldest brother, knowing that they would be beaten again when they returned. Luo Guang was about to continue to talk trash, when a man who followed Luo Guang into the alley suddenly ran towards Luo Guang, then jumped up, kicked him in the air, and took Luo Guang's head. If it's a sneak attack, it's a sneak attack. Is it necessary to kick him in the air? Isn't this just asking someone to attack the man's weakness under his crotch? Luo Guang, who was attacked by someone, still had the leisure to complain about the other party. However, since Luo Guang chose to enter this alley, he was naturally prepared for the battle. He was the last to arrive, dodged the opponent's kick, and then intercepted with his right hand, punched out, and hit the opponent's popliteal fossa behind his leg. The enemy who attacked lost his balance in the air, turned half a circle, and hit the concrete floor with his head. After a dull sound, he lost consciousness. Luo Guang was merciful, otherwise the target of the punch just now would not be the popliteal fossa but the double balls under the crotch, and the forbidden martial arts would be used. The person in charge saw this and rushed towards Luo Guang at the moment of the sneak attack. Then after Luo Guang entered the alley, he kept a certain distance from the people in the alley, so after Luo Guang dealt with the sneak attacker, the 3 small leaders came late. The opponent rushed towards Luo Guang in a triangle stance, and Luo Guang directly used a back fist with his left hand to pull back, and the enemy's face with his left fist raised was directly pulled crooked, and fell to the side, unable to get up again. The enemy on the right was kicking, but Luo Guang grabbed his ankle with his right hand, and then pulled and pressed him back, forcing him to sit down. At the same time, Luo Guang, who was retreating, also avoided the high whip kick from the small leader in front of him. The enemy behind him had arrived, and Luo Guang decisively gave up the enemy who was doing the splits, and directly leaned down and turned around, avoiding the enemy's right swinging fist, and punched the enemy's abdomen with his right fist, knocking the enemy back several steps. The enemy, whose attack route had just been blocked by his teammates, took advantage of the teammate's retreat, bypassed the teammate, and used a right straight punch directly from the side. However, Luo Guang dodged sideways, grabbed the enemy's straight punch with one hand and pulled it towards himself, and directly passed through the enemy's wide-open middle door with the other hand, pressed a palm on the opponent's face, and pushed hard, combined with a kick, directly causing the enemy to lose balance and fall backwards, just hitting the person who retreated before. At this time, in addition to the fainted enemy, there were two more in front and behind. The little leader helped his teammate who was doing a split, and was about to help the other two, when he saw that the two younger brothers were beaten up by Luo Guang, so he didn't dare to rush up to be a sandbag for Luo Guang for a while. The two men who were repelled by Luo Guang did not give up. They looked at each other and continued to attack from the left and right. The opponent, one on the left and one on the right, each swung a straight punch, directly hitting Luo Guang's face, and Luo Guang used both hands to block the opponent's forearm with both arms and then exerted force on both sides of his body. At the same time, he jumped forward, bent his arms, and pushed his elbows horizontally, hitting the chests of the two opponents. The two retreated in pain, and Luo Guang took advantage of the victory to pursue, turning elbow strikes into punches, and with the change of footsteps, the two retreating people could not leave Luo Guang's attack range, and each of them took another punch from Luo Guang. This time, the two chose to fall directly, and never wanted to stand up and be beaten again. The little leader and the enemy who had just done a split did not launch another attack. They looked at Luo Guang in horror, but they did not dare to expose their backs to Luo Guang and run away. The little leader had a gloomy face, and he took out a dagger. Seeing this, the other people did the same. "Rich man, we are going to play for real next. You'd better surrender obediently, otherwise the sword has no eyes, be careful that your life will be in danger." The opponent's unsystematic fighting style just now reminded Luo Guang of those street thugs. "For real? If I hadn't held back, I would have killed all of you trash with one punch." After gaining some practical experience in fighting skills, Luo Guang stopped talking nonsense and took out his pistol and asked, "Who are you?" The first reaction of the two people who were still standing on the other side when they saw the pistol was to throw away the knives in their hands and raise their hands to surrender directly. "Boss, he is asking you." The man who was obviously a younger brother looked at the little leader and said. The little leader knew that the person in front of him was a rich man, and his skills were not like those of an ordinary person, so he didn't dare to bet whether the gun in Luo Guang's hand was real. "You guy," the little leader glared at the people around him, and then said to Luo Guang with some flattery, "We are from a local gang, called the Hell Angels. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content." After saying that, the little leader also rolled up his clothes and showed the tattoo on his abdomen, which was a tattoo of a Lucifer pattern. "Why are you monitoring the man in the apartment? Who ordered you to do it?" Hearing that the other party was a gang, Luo Guang thought that his first shot in the identity of a mysterious vigilante seemed to start from the local gang. Under Luo Guang's gun, the other party did not dare to hide it, and said timidly, "It was the ABC Chuck family who ordered us to do it. They want the information about the guy in the apartment." ABC Chuck family, this name is really strange. Is this family an admirer of the famous reasoning master Agatha Christie? Luo Guang thought of the author of the ABC murder case and asked. The small leaders did not dare to talk about the family name of the most powerful local gang. They trembled and said that they had never heard of Agatha, so they did not know whether Luo Guang was right or not. Luo Guang thought about it and did not expect that he would be accidentally involved in Hank's affairs. He said, "Why did the Chuck family find you?" "They didn't say, they just asked us to monitor that person and those who had contact with him." If it's just monitoring, how do you explain your actions just now? Luo Guang did not believe them. The little leader was worried that Luo Guang would misunderstand and lead to him being shot, so he quickly replied, "We saw that you were rich, so we planned to make some extra money." Luo Guang nodded. This explanation was reasonable. He stepped on the little thug who wanted to stand up next to him and continued to ask, "Since you are a local gang, you should have your own sources of intelligence. It is impossible that you are unaware of the reason for the Chuck family's actions, right?" The little leader racked his brains and kept recalling the recent intelligence, and the little brother next to him thought of it first and said, "I thought of one thing. We started monitoring a week ago. Before that." Before the little brother finished speaking, the little leader also thought of that incident after the little brother mentioned it, and said, "First, the son of the leader of the Chuck family and his friend were beaten up. It seems that they were knocked down by one person. Besides that, is there anything else?" Luo Guang thought that it was only because his son was beaten that the Chuck family did not send out members of their own gang, but threw these things to the subordinate gangs. The two shook their heads. Apart from that, they could no longer remember anything else. Luo Guang gave the Hell Angels a good lesson, and also got the location of their base, the name of the leader, and the base information of the ABC Chuck family. The purpose of asking these questions was not to go to the other gang base to rob the gang, but as a threat of revenge afterwards. The Hell Angels were not stupid. They obviously received Luo Guang's threat and said that they would not tell anyone about what happened tonight. Then they helped the unconscious man up and looked at Luo Guang. Anyway, this was not Luo Guang's real identity, so Luo Guang didn't say anything else and let them go. After dealing with these minions, Luo Guang went to the apartment and knocked on Hank's door. This was not the first time they met, so Hank didn't ask anything else this time. After seeing Luo Guang's face in the cat's eye, he opened the door. "You are being monitored," Luo Guang whispered this, and Hank's eyes instantly regained their previous sharpness. The two walked in. Hank first checked the room and then asked, "Who is monitoring me?" Luo Guang told Hank what he had encountered before. Hank recalled and said, "Indeed, I beat up a group of people recently." Luo Guang was not surprised that Hank beat up a group of people alone, and waited for him to continue. "That day, I just successfully came to Berlin through my previous relationship. It happened that because of the mission, I was in a low mood that day, so I went to a bar to drink beer. Then I was provoked." Luo Guang looked at Hank's ordinary face, without a trace of the temperament of a strong man. Hank smiled helplessly. "When I was in the army, I was often challenged as a soft persimmon. I remember that once when I welcomed new recruits, those newborn calves came up and said they wanted to challenge me." Recalling the past, Hank had a smile on his face. "Then you beat them all, but this is not uncommon for gangs. If you want to retaliate every time you are beaten, the cost is too high. Now is not the past. This kind of crazy revenge will attract the attention of the government, so Luo Guang thinks that Hank should not simply teach the other party a lesson." But Luo Guang had wrongly blamed Hank. The ABC Chuck family was not a gang from Germany. Most of its members were Palestinians from Lebanon. They had few formal members, but they had recruited many small gangs like the Hell Angels to supplement their strength. The ABC Chuck family gang was known for its stubbornness and recklessness, and had a crazy gang style. Hank felt a little embarrassed when he heard what Luo Guang said. He touched his nose and said, "I have held back, but one person was still seriously injured. If what you said is true, and I am not mistaken, that person should be the son of the leader of the Chuck family you mentioned. Then what are you going to do? You are being targeted by the other party," Luo Guang asked. Hank took out a gun from somewhere and said, "We can only do this. This is the capital of Prussia. I don't think they dare to do anything too chaotic. I have said everything I should say. You can handle the rest yourself." Luo Guang saw that the other party was going to work alone, so he understood that Hank didn't want to owe him a favor. He didn't say much. He couldn't beg to help the other party. This chapter is not over yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Thank you. Hank sent Luo Guang to the door, and then apologized to Luo Guang. Luo Guang nodded, left the apartment, checked the map, and confirmed the location of the Chuck family's base. Although you don't want me to help, I can't trust those little gangsters. It's only a matter of time before they give me up, Luo Guang muttered to himself and walked towards the destination of the Chuck family members. The headquarters of the Chuck family is a large house on the edge of the city. When Luo Guang walked there, it was dark and most people had gone home to rest. After all, the ABC Chuck family is known for its stubbornness and recklessness. If someone disrespects them, they will fight back. They are known as crazy people. With years of ruthlessness, they make other gangs dare not attack their headquarters. So when Luo Guang observed in the early stage, he found that except for the two doors at the front and back, there were no surveillance cameras installed on the walls on both sides. Therefore, Luo Guang climbed over the left wall and lurked in the grass in the garden. At this time, Luo Guang, including his face, was covered with black hardened armor on all vital parts of his body. The head armor was angular and designed by Luo Guang to be very majestic. Compared with the future warrior, he was more like a heavy armored knight from the Middle Ages. Quietly hiding in the bushes, Luo Guang observed the situation of the house. The house was brightly lit, and there were laughter and joy in the house. Luo Guang looked through the floor-to-ceiling glass and found that the family members inside seemed to be having a party. Outside the house, Luo Guang did not see anyone patrolling, nor did he find the existence of surveillance cameras. The purpose of Luo Guang's trip was not to eliminate all the members of the Chuck family, but to target the current leader of the Chuck family. After all, Hank beat the leader's son, so as long as Luo Guang beat the son's father, the Chuck family should not focus on Hank. This is why Luo Guang did not rush into the party directly and stab the leader Arafat Abuchuk, who was sitting in the main seat, but watched the group movement inside and waited quietly for silence to come. After all, the leader Arafat is already over 50 years old. Unlike other people, he can't stay up late. Just after 12 o'clock in the morning, Arafat told the people around him a few words and asked him to ask others to go to other places to continue playing. Some girls were still passionate, but they were soon dragged away by their respective male companions, because the members of the Chuck family knew that Arafat was not a good person to talk to. Meow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 128. Chapter 125. The Incident Fermented. Good evening. Arafat had just laid down for a while when he heard a greeting from his side. Arafat was about to sit up when he saw the devil-like mask on the other person's face and the pistol in his hand. Arafat was a great hero after all. He had experienced many life and death battles over the years and had been assassinated more than once or twice. After the initial shock, he quickly regained his composure and kept thinking about the origin of the person in front of him. As for how the other person got in, it was meaningless to Arafat. Who are you? Are you having a bad night? Luo Guang's voice became low after passing through the mask. Arafat naturally would not answer according to Luo Guang's words. He tried to take the initiative in the conversation and said, I tell you, you'd better think clearly about who you are facing. If anything happens to me, our family will definitely make you pay the price. The leader of the Chuck family wanted to use his family's long-standing image of a madman to force the enemy back. He had used this method when facing assassins before, but he would definitely take endless revenge on the killer afterwards. However, Luo Guang did not care about the other party's threats. Since the other party did not answer according to his words, he was too lazy to ask again. A flash of cold light passed by, and Arafat's neck was directly cut off by a sharp blade. It was the new Gurkha knife that Luo Guang had obtained. This knife, named Invisible, had been hidden behind Luo Guang since he entered Arafat's bedroom. In addition, Arafat's attention had been focused on Luo Guang's pistol, so Luo Guang's extremely fast and fatal blow did not cause Arafat, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, to react. With disbelief in his eyes, Arafat died in his bedroom. After Luo Guang finished dealing with Arafat, he did not run away immediately. Instead, he used his blood to paint on the white wall, and then signed the names of other local German gangs under the painting. Luo Guang signed 8 gang names in a row, and finally thought about it and painted the name of the Hell Angels gang on the top of the transformation. After all, this name also fits the Lucifer that Luo Guang tried to draw. Looking at his own painting, Luo Guang nodded, wiped the blood on the knife with a velvet pillow, opened the window, and jumped out directly. Arafat's bedroom is on the 6th floor, so Luo Guang has enough height to jump directly outside the wall, and then roll and slide to relieve the force, and Luo Guang stood up. Not in a hurry to remove the armor, Luo Guang avoided the few cameras, returned to the city of Berlin, and then put the hardened armor back into his body, waiting for things to ferment. Sitting on the bed and watching the movie Superman vs. Batgirl on the hotel's pay movie channel, Luo Guang suddenly glared and remembered that he forgot to leave his vigilante name on the wall. The next morning, Arafat's housekeeper asked the chef to prepare breakfast, and then waited for Arafat to get up at the door of the bedroom. However, today was unusual. It was an hour later than usual, but there was no movement in Arafat's bedroom, which made the housekeeper who had followed Arafat for many years a little uneasy. But he didn't have the courage, nor the right to knock the door to wake up Arafat, so he chose to contact the core members of the Chuk family by phone. Many people didn't sleep last night. After leaving Arafat's mansion, they went to other places to continue playing, so when the core members gathered in the mansion, nearly 2 hours had passed. Some people got up in a bad mood and didn't give the housekeeper a good look. But some more experienced people knew that the housekeeper had been with Arafat for more than 30 years and was a tough guy in the past, so the housekeeper was so anxious to gather everyone, and it was probably because something happened to Arafat, which made their inner desire for power stir. Witnessed by the core members, the housekeeper opened the door and looked inside the bedroom, and the people gasped. "Everyone, don't move," the housekeeper shouted, stopping the people who wanted to rush in, and the noses of the people behind bumped into the backs of the former. Arafat's elder brother and younger brother naturally knew why the housekeeper did this. The two looked at each other, shook their heads, and confirmed with their eyes that it was not the other who did it. That's the name of the Bundesliga gang, and there are also gangs such as the Ruhr gang. One of them put his eyes on the painting on the wall and found the signature on it. There is another name at the top, Hell Angels. I seem to have heard this name somewhere. Someone made a new discovery and then thought about it. What should we do? Arafat's eldest brother asked the housekeeper to maintain order, and then pulled the third brother aside to chat. The third brother and his brother both looked worried. Although he and his eldest brother both wanted to seize power and usurp the throne, they would definitely kill the eldest brother, third brother, first. No matter how we fight, let's first get rid of the people who killed your second brother. The eldest brother was relatively stable. In his opinion, the stability of his gang was the most important. But for the third brother, the eldest brother's idea gave him an opportunity. He said he agreed, but in his heart he had already started to plot to kill the eldest brother. As for Arafat's son, no one present cared. In their opinion, Arafat's son was a coward and a second-generation rich man. If he was relied on to manage the family, it would be directly divided up by other gangs in less than a year. Relying on his father's status, he spent all the money on fun and enjoyment over the years, using the money to make friends with those bad guys, but he could call the people below the family to come and go at will, and he never got the real respect of even the lowest gang members. For the eldest brother and the third brother, who each controlled a quarter of the gang's power. Arafat's son was just a waste that would be wiped out sooner or later in the competition for the gang leader. Suddenly thinking of someone who was not here, the eldest brother asked, "By the way, where is our nephew? Who knows where he went to fool around with those bad people again?" The third brother looked at the guy with disdain, smoked a cigar, and continued, "Tell me about your plan." On the other side, Hank, who was eating pizza for lunch, suddenly heard a violent knock and shouting outside the door. Thinking of what Wu Song said, he picked up the pistol stuck under the dining table, walked over, and finally heard what the people outside the door were shouting. The people outside the door were shouting for help. "Who is it?" Hank was afraid that the door would be knocked open when he used the peephole to check outside, so he hid on both sides of the door and asked loudly. Hearing Hank's response, the people outside the door finally stopped knocking on the door, and said with anxiety in their tone, "We are from the Hells Angels gang, and we were sent by the ABC Chuck family to monitor you because you beat the leader's son." "That was not done by me." Hank first denied what he had done and tried to test the other side's attitude. "Brother, whether it was you or not, please help us, you are in big trouble now." The Hells Angels' teeth were trembling, and they couldn't speak clearly. "It's none of my business." Hank felt that the matter was strange. According to Luo Guang, the other party had been monitoring him for a long time. It must be because of something that the other party suddenly jumped out. As for the reason, Hank guessed that it might be because they failed to kidnap Wu Song and had already alarmed the enemy, so they suddenly adopted radical methods. Suddenly, it was quiet outside. With a thump, the door was knocked open, and a man rushed in and fell to the ground. The person behind wanted to follow in, but Hank stretched out his legs and tripped the person behind him. Then a pistol appeared in Hank's sight, stretched into the door, and aimed at Hank. Hank grabbed the holster of the pistol, and the other hand holding the gun fired continuously at the door. The other party also fired a shot in a nervous situation, and then used his body to eat up the bullets of Hank's pistol. The man with the gun was pulled in by Hank, who had thrown away the pistol, as a meat shield, and at the same time, he took the pistol that had only fired one shot and pulled the holster. There were still people with guns outside, firing continuously at the door. The two people who fell before were trembling at this time, lying on the ground, skillfully holding their heads with both hands, and dared not get up. With a slight click, Hank heard the sound of bullets being used up outside the door, but he did not stand out and shoot directly. Instead, he pushed the meat shield out of the door, then squatted and shot at the two enemies outside the door. In order to quickly subdue the enemy, Hank fired 4 shots in a row, one on the left and one on the right. Since the other party even took out the gun, Hank also regained his usual coldness at this time. After confirming that it was safe outside the door, he finished off the 2 people who were shot twice in the chest. Because Hank was wearing gloves, he did not need to wipe off the fingerprints. He threw the other party's gun at his feet directly, and then Hank walked into the room and took out another pistol from the inside of the coat on the hanger beside the door. The people lying on the ground had already noticed that someone was killed, and they did not dare to breathe. They kept lowering their bodies to reduce their presence, and naturally they would not suddenly attack while Hank was doing those things. To make a long story short, what's going on? Hank could see that the 2 people in front of him and the 2 people with guns were 2 groups of people, so he asked directly. Hank gave him a more terrifying feeling than when he faced Wu Song. The small leader who had intended to kidnap Luo Guang had his pants wet and said in fear, "The people you killed are the son of the leader of the ABC Chuck family and his bodyguard." The reason why the small leader gave the surveillance before was not because of Luo Guang's conversation with them yesterday, but because Arafat's son said it himself. After he came out of the hospital, he was so angry that he took his bodyguards and 2 people from the Hell Angels to go to Hank directly. So this filial son didn't know that his father Arafat had died until his death. I don't know what he would feel when he went to hell and saw his father in front of him. You also saw that the other party took out the gun first, Hank explained. In the eyes of the gang, many gang members have guns, but they are basically used to scare people, and there are not many opportunities to shoot. But even if he knew this, Hank would not feel a trace of regret. Those who dared to aim a gun at him had not lived for more than 30 seconds in the world. The remaining two people did not have any guns, and he did see the Lucifer tattoo that Luo Guang had mentioned, so he told them to get out of here, and he was going to run away. After hearing what Luo Guang said, Hank had packed his luggage long ago, just in case, and walked around the house, collecting the weapons scattered in the apartment, and chose 2 pistols to put on his body. He did not carry other weapons, but threw them next to the body outside the door. Finally, Hank took the note Luo Guang gave him, put on his baseball cap, and left the room. Then Hank, who had just left the apartment and turned into an alley, ran into the 2 Hell Angels again. The little leader had already started crying. When he saw Hank, he knelt down in front of Hank and cried, "Brother, if you are so powerful and difficult to deal with, you should have told us earlier. Even the leader of the Chuck family was killed by you. And how can our small gang dare to write its name above those big gangs? If you do this, our gang will be finished." The little leader who had just left the apartment received a call from his leader and was told about the death of the leader of the ABC Chuck family. He also said that someone drew a Hell Angel pattern at the murder scene and arrogantly wrote the gang name on top. Although the little leader had no definite evidence, he immediately suspected that it was the work of the friend of the strong man in front of him, the man who knew Kung Fu yesterday. "What do you mean? I haven't left the apartment recently. If you really monitor me, there is no reason not to know," Hank said strangely. "We only monitor your door. It's either you or the person who visited you yesterday." Because Hank lives in a room on the 5th floor close to the street, the people monitoring him only bribed the security guards in the monitoring room of the apartment. Hank also learned from Wu Song that the monitoring room of the apartment building was taken over by the gang, but the situation was urgent just now, and so many gunshots would definitely make the surrounding residents call the police, so he did not go to the monitoring room. "Is it him?" Hank heard the other party's words and immediately thought that Wu Song's purpose of looking for him was to recruit him, and he couldn't help but wonder if this matter was a conspiracy of the other party. "Then you came here today to avenge that leader?" "No, it was the son of leader Arafat who came to us to trouble you after he was discharged from the hospital." The little leader's words made Hank know that it was not Wu Song's design to let these people in front of him trouble him, but more likely to attract attention, but he didn't expect that the son was a fool, who came to trouble him after being discharged from the hospital, and didn't even know that his father had passed away. "Get out of here, don't let me see you again." Hank was planning to flee Germany anyway, and those small gangs didn't have the courage to go to the police station to testify, so Hank let the few people in front of him go. When the 2 small leaders heard this, they hurriedly crawled out of the alley. In order to get into trouble, they were going to delete the surveillance of the apartment. "Wu Song, I have something to ask you." Seeing the other party walking away, Hank lowered the brim of his hat and walked away, while taking out his phone to contact Wu Song. Luo Guang followed behind Hank and said, "I have deleted the surveillance records in the apartment monitoring room for you." When Hank heard the other party's words, he instantly got goosebumps all over his body. He turned his head and saw Wu Song, who was looking at him with a smile. Meow. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 129. Chapter 126. The prototype of forming a unit. "Follow me." Luo Guang didn't say much nonsense. He deleted the surveillance video just to show that he was on the same side as the other party. "When did you follow me?" This was the first time that Hank was touched behind him silently, which made him feel insecure, but he knew Wu Song, so he didn't draw his gun. In fact, Luo Guang planned to find Hank to explain the situation after getting up early this morning, but he didn't expect that Luo Guang saw the little leader of the Hell Angels gang and a few fierce people entering the apartment building where Hank was downstairs. Luo Guang trusted Hank's fighting ability, and Hank had a gun at home, so he didn't rush to help, but went directly to the monitoring room of the apartment to control the people of the Hell Angels gang there. Seeing Hank on the screen showing no mercy to the enemy with a gun, but letting go of the unarmed minions, Luo Guang nodded. This judgment was in line with his judgment of Hank's view of good and evil. Luo Guang, who originally planned to wait for Hank to come and clean up the surveillance video in the monitoring room, found that Hank had left the apartment in a hurry, so he had to hurry to delete the video, and then followed the pheromones left on the note with his phone number and caught up with Hank. Seeing that Hank seemed to take this issue very seriously, Luo Guang did not hide it. He came to Hank and said, "In fact, I just caught up with you and was about to call you when I saw you take out your phone. It was late and there were many pedestrians around, so it was relatively easy to hide the traces of the stalker, so Hank did not ask any more questions." "Did you kill the man named Arafat?" As the two walked together, Hank lowered his voice and told Luo Guang what he had just encountered and the information he knew, and then confirmed it. Luo Guang smiled bitterly and said, "Yes, I originally planned to draw his son's attention away from you, but who knew that he didn't receive the message and went directly to you?" The housekeeper omitted that no one would forget to notify Arafat's son, but the content of the housekeeper's phone call was generally to convey Arafat's reprimand, so he refused to answer the housekeeper's call in anger. Luo Guang's statement was consistent with Hank's speculation, so Hank did not question Luo Guang's words and said, "Now I have to run away. Is there a place to go?" Hank shook his head. In order to leave Umbrella, he spent a lot of money to change his identity, but he had lived here for less than 2 months and had to run away. If he had known this, he might as well sneak in and use the money to eat something good, so as not to eat pizza every day. "What are your plans for the future?" Luo Guang asked again, and Hank still shook his head. For a moment, he didn't think of any plans, but Hank's hand clenched the gun for a while. After the battle just now, he missed the old days a little. Thinking that maybe he should become a mercenary, Hank was about to speak when he heard Luo Guang say, "In that case, why don't you work for me?" "Work? I can't do clerical work, and I'm not interested in blue-collar jobs." Hank was a little confused. Luo Guang smiled and gave the answer Hank was expecting, "You can understand it as a mercenary, but our business is different from other mercenaries, and it's like returning to your old job for you. You don't want to set up a private army like the USS to eliminate dissidents for you, do you?" Hank suspected. He no longer wanted to join the kind of army that he couldn't retire normally after joining. To be precise, it should be a unit like the UBCS. I want to set up an elite unit specifically for solving biochemical crisis incidents." Luo Guang expressed his thoughts, "And Hank, you are the core of my unit." For Hank, most biological and chemical weapons are not as scary as guns and cannons, so in his opinion, this kind of work is much safer than being cannon fodder in a war-torn country. After thinking about the pros and cons of this matter, Hank nodded and accepted Luo Guang's invitation, and asked, "That's exactly what I want. Where is our base? Who else are there?" After being asked by Hank, Luo Guang was speechless for a moment and did not answer. Finally, under Hank's sharp gaze, Luo Guang said embarrassedly, "There is no base yet, and the members of the team are only you and me, the boss who works part-time in personnel." "Are you kidding?" Hank was speechless. He thought that the other party had made preliminary preparations long ago, and then came to find a strong general like him to join. These things can't be concealed, so Luo Guang didn't think of lying, and said, "No way, I don't understand these, and I can't use my connections and relationships." "Your connections and relationships can't be used." Luo Guang's words made Hank understand a lot, and it's no wonder that Luo Guang would find someone like him who has a background in Umbrella. He said, "So, you have found the right person. I do have a lot of connections and connections that don't belong to Umbrella. Those are the resources I accumulated before retiring from the army. But let me say first, if you use those resources to form a decent army, the service will be thoughtful, but the price is not low. In the past, these expenses could be reimbursed by the army, so money was not a problem, but now it has been transferred to private, so Hank has to give the boss a heads up in advance, which is also a test of the boss's financial resources. After all, in Hank's view, the mercenary industry also needs to burn money. Is $10 million enough? Luo Guang plans to invest all the reward from the Elixir of Life mission of organization. This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. Moreover, Luo Guang must keep this army in his hands to prevent it from being corrupted by others. Hank choked on his saliva and his voice became much louder. He turned to look at Luo Guang and asked, "Cough. Cough. What? How much?" 10 million. Luo Guang didn't feel sorry for the money spent at all. Instead, he wondered why Hank had such a big reaction. Hank straightened his breathing before saying, "Although I said the asking price is high, it only costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to form an elite force of 8 or 9 people, and this is based on the most expensive place on the market. Price. The minimum number of main combat troops is 16, and there must be a lot of auxiliary combatants, right? We also need a lot of people in terms of logistics support, daily management, medical management, etc., right? Are hundreds of thousands enough?" When Hank heard Luo Guang's words, he knew that Luo Guang really didn't know how to do it. He explained, "The company you are talking about is a mercenary company. An ordinary mercenary team does not need so many things. I remember not long ago, the Lighthouse, a mercenary and private security company established by several SEALs in China, has started business. Do you plan to follow their model?" Luo Guang replied seriously, "I'm not imitating you. I don't use you as consumables." With the exposure of the Raccoon City incident, Umbrella Company is declining, and ambitious people are waiting to carve up Umbrella Company biochemical weapons research results. Are you saying that biohazard incidents will only become more frequent and more widespread in the future? Hank was not a political idiot. He figured out the key to it all at once. Luo Guang nodded and took Hank back to his hotel. After checking the room, he continued the topic, "As the number of biohazard incidents increases, we will expand and even transform from a private mercenary organization. As an international organization, this way you veterans will have a way out. Being an instructor to train more soldiers is better than staying at home to grow flowers and fish, right?" Hank didn't think there was anything wrong with Luo Guang's long-term plan. Since the biochemical weapons in Pandora's box were released, he didn't think humans could prevent biochemical crises from happening in the future. He said seriously, "I understand, in this case, maybe I can find some people from Umbrella to come and help. Is it trustworthy?" Luo Guang himself is from Umbrella, and there are many people in Umbrella who don't know the dirty things of the company, so he will not directly reject people with Umbrella background. Hank nodded and said, "At least they don't know about Umbrella's development of biochemical weapons, and I plan to find the main combatants from UBCS. Due to the impact of recent events, the company's finances seem to be in trouble. I heard people say that most of the UBCS personnel have had their wages reduced. This is a good opportunity for us to grab people, not only combat personnel, but also support staff. Preference will be given to those with biohazard experience. Are they the survivors of the Raccoon City incident? In that case, there may not be enough to gather 16 people." Hank nodded, understanding what Luo Guang meant. Just starting out, Luo Guang didn't beg to get it done in one step, and he also knew that UBCS had suffered a heavy blow in Raccoon City, so he didn't feel regretful and said, "Do your best. What do you think about medical care and personnel management?" Luo Guang can only discuss this with Hank now. "In medical and human resources management, I can look for headhunters to see the human resources they have. However, the loyalty of those people generally only depends on money, so loyalty depends on the amount of money you give. Those people will be needed in the early stage. After several incidents and our reputation has been established, we will naturally be able to recruit like-minded talents. Luo Guang, who is not an impractical person, replied. Anyway, really important secrets don't need to be told to medical or human resources people, so Luo Guang thinks this is acceptable. Where is the base? Where do you plan to use it as our headquarters? If we are just starting out, site selection is very important. It is related to our service objects and scope of services. Hank got on the boat and naturally gave us a very serious answer. Luo Guang made suggestions. Luo Guang had done his homework a long time ago and said, NATO has the Red Claw Force, but the main service targets of that force are the lighthouse countries, the Republic of China, and Prussia. The coverage area is mainly Western European countries. So we have to target countries other than Red Claws. Hank followed Luo Guang's train of thought for a while, and said, are you talking about Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and Northern Europe? The main target is Eastern Europe. If these countries encounter a biochemical crisis, they will not dare to let NATO troops go to help for a while. This is the time for us to recommend ourselves. Even if they don't care about civilians, they and the powerful will always find someone to help you out. I temporarily plan to place the first stronghold in the Republic of Edonia in Eastern Europe. The Republic of Edonia? That war-torn country. Hank was surprised. He felt that this environment was not suitable for a nascent team. This accident could easily cause the newly formed team to die. As soon as he saw Hank's expression, Luo Guang understood what Hank was surprised and worried about, and explained, it is precisely because of the war that we have the opportunity to gain a foothold there. Other Eastern European countries will not allow mercenaries to build bases in their own countries. My plan is to go there and discuss with the government to purchase the airport and directly convert it into our base. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content below. With the government, although Hank has not paid attention to the war situation there recently, it is said that the situation of the national government is not good, and the various fronts have been suppressed by the resistance. They are short of money. If there is no one behind the rebels to support them, they can't beat the government army at all. But if the rebels succeed in coming to power, they will not recognize the purchase contract between us and the government, right? Hank was worried about this and put forward his own suggestion, saying, there are many mercenaries in that country, so they jointly occupied a town as a base for all mercenaries to provide services to both sides of the war. Do you think we can get involved in that town? Our business does not overlap with theirs, and we may even hire them, so I think it should not be difficult to find a place there as a base, and there is a small airport available there, but the pilots there are all wild planes. If our team wants to go to other countries, you may also need to spend money to manage it. That sounds okay, because I plan to cover the business scope in Africa and Central Asia. Luo Guang thought that the place Hank mentioned was not bad, but he still needed to go and see the place first. Then the base will be temporarily set there, Hank said when he saw that the boss had no objection. The base was also temporarily settled. Luo Guang thought about what else was needed and said, what else is there to do next? I have a candidate for a supplier of weapons and equipment. I can also buy other training equipment. If I go, I can get a discount. Hank thought for a while and said. Luo Guang nodded. Although he also found the sales phone numbers of those arms dealers, it would be better if Hank knew them. The personnel, equipment, and base matters were almost discussed. The last thing was to put them into practice. The Red Claws were still busy with the affairs on Benoi Island. There was no news from Wang Wei recently, so no one would look for Luo Guang for a while, which gave Luo Guang plenty of time to do his own things. The next stop was the Republic of Edonia, but before that, he had something to do in Berlin. By the way, I'm collecting the name of this unit. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 130. Chapter 127 Cooperation. 3 days later, after many twists and turns, Luo Guang and Hank finally arrived at the mercenary town of the Republic of Edenia. This twist and turn was not because Hank's affair in Berlin was exposed, but because the road to the mercenary town Hank mentioned was very long, and he had to pass through several possible war zones along the way. Is this the town? Luo Guang jumped out of the car and asked, looking at the ruins in front of him. At this time, there were few intact houses in the town that Luo Guang and his 2 men could see, as if they had been shelled several times, and there was no one on the streets. Hank hadn't been here for a long time and said in surprise, "But I didn't remember wrongly or got lost. This is indeed a mercenary town." Luo Guang and Hank each stood by the car holding an ACM assault rifle and did not leave hastily. They carefully observed the surrounding situation. But Luo Guang noticed that someone in the surrounding building that was still intact opened a window, revealing a gap, and an eye appeared, secretly looking at Luo Guang and the 2. "Can I ask someone?" Luo Guang was confirming the location of the person who was peeking at him. He didn't want to leave his car. After all, who knew if the car would still be there after leaving or if it had been dismantled when he returned. Although the pickup truck Hank drove was very dilapidated, it was already a very precious luxury product in the Republic of Edenia. It took Luo Guang 57 bullets to get it. "Then let me make a call." Hank took out a satellite phone. This was equipped by Luo Guang for Hank. In the future, when Luo Guang returns to the lighthouse country or goes on a mission elsewhere, Hank can use this phone to contact Luo Guang. At this time, the person Hank contacted was an old friend of his, a businessman named Susan. This person had great power here and was the actual manager of the mercenary town. It was rumored that the mercenaries and Su in the town were Shan is more or less related. "Susan, this is Hank. We are here, but it is very different from before. Was it attacked?" "Oh, my dear Hank." Susan's first words sounded very excited, and she said, "You just keep driving inside. That area has indeed been attacked, so we expanded to the other side." "Thank you," Hank said expressionlessly and hung up the phone after answering. Hank interrupted his boss directly, "Don't ask. He only saved Susan once when he was on a mission when he was young, and then he was targeted by Susan. However, Susan is not stalking Hank. She just unabashedly expresses her love for Hank every time she meets him. According to Susan, Hank is the kind of person who will never be restrained by a woman. Man, so she would not forcibly restrain Hank because of her love. I have to ask why you are looking for her." Luo Guang nudged Hank with his elbow, without any airs of boss. For Hank, this mode of getting along is more comfortable, even though his boss sometimes seems a bit unserious. Luo Guang's words seemed to be gossiping about his own affairs, but in fact he was confirming whether there was a possibility of secret communication between Hank and Susan. The one who is still developing here and is the biggest and strongest is her. Hank also didn't expect that the innocent girl he saved casually back then would be the daughter of an arms dealer. Luo Guang nodded, trusting the people he hired and not the people he suspected. Since Hank gave a reasonable explanation and it was consistent with the information he had found, there was no need for him to ask any more questions. The 2 got in the car again and continued to drive less than 50 meters when a child suddenly rushed out on the road ahead and blocked the car about 30 meters away, but Hank did not slow down. Instead, he accelerated and rushed over. Upon seeing this, Luo Guang instantly understood that Hank thought this was an enemy trap, and immediately loaded the single-barreled KPV heavy machine gun in his hand and prepared for it. When the child saw the other person charging towards him with a menacing look, he was frightened and instinctively jumped to the side. The front of the pickup truck driven by Hank barely missed the child's feet, almost frightening the child's heart to a halt. In addition to the child's matter along the way, Luo Guang also fired a few shots to scare away those who were hiding behind the wall and plotting evil intentions. Then he encountered no further obstacles and arrived at a place where a large number of mercenaries were active. Susan had already sent someone out to greet them, and Luo Guang had loaded weapons in his hands, so when they entered the town, Luo Guang and the others did not encounter the usual tentative provocations from others. Arriving at the place where Susan was, it was the former government building of this town. Although it was only 3.5 stories high, it was already the largest building in the town. Luo Guang did not jump out of the car in a hurry, but directly disassembled the KPV heavy machine gun, twisted it in one hand, and then jumped to the ground. Under the surprised gazes of the surrounding mercenaries, Luo Guang did not twist the nearly 50-kilogram thing with one hand and walk sideways. He did these things as if he were walking on flat ground. This thing is too long and is actually not suitable for being held in the hand and used for shooting. However, the most valuable thing in the car is this killer weapon, so Luo Guang took it off and took it away. His intention was not to intimidate the people around him. The people sent by Susan looked embarrassed when they saw Luo Guang trying to go in with the big killer weapon in his hand. When he was about to say something, a close friend of Susan came out and welcomed Hank and Luo Guang in. Luo Guang asked Hank to go forward, and soon saw Susan opening her arms to hug Hank in front of everyone, but Hank's face was still, and he raised his arms to block the opponent. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Hank turned his head to look at Luo Guang helplessly, just in time to see Luo Guang's snickering expression. However, Luo Guang did not make the situation awkward for too long and said, "Hank, let me introduce you." Hank breathed a sigh of relief, and after putting a little distance between himself and Susan, he said, "Susan, this is my boss." "Hello, my name is Wusong." Luo Guang didn't have stage fright. This was the confidence that came naturally after becoming stronger. Susan did not reach out to shake hands with Luo Guang and said, "Before that, I have to test whether you are qualified to be Hank's boss. I don't want my Hank to follow a playboy who only has money." Although Susan didn't find out Wusong's real background, the background she could find and the fact that he was spending money lavishly gave Susan reason to worry that Wusong was the kind of person who would just play and leave. And Susan also needs something to convince some people present to cooperate deeply with Luo Guang, and the best way to convince others in this town where strength is respected is to show one's own force. As for the reason why Susan wanted to cooperate in depth with Hank, it was Hank's mention of the future of the spread of biohazard to her and the vast anti-biohazard market that would bring Susan's attention. What should I say? Luo Guang was not afraid. It could also be used to hone his fighting skills. The only thing he was worried about was that he accidentally beat the opponent to death. Laura Susan clapped her hands, and an Arab woman wearing Middle Eastern clothes stood up behind her. Then Susan said to Luo Guang, "Just have a fight. There are no rules except guns." Susan's words were still echoing in the air. Laura lowered her body and rushed towards Luo Guang. She changed her steps and walked in an S shape. She quickly bypassed Susan and Hank. She didn't know when she had drawn out 2 scimitars. "Hold it in your hand." The KPV heavy machine gun in Luo Guang's hand is nearly 2 meters long, which is longer than the opponent's scimitar. 1 inch longer and 1 inch stronger, Luo Guang directly took the heavy machine gun and slashed Huashan with one blow from top to bottom, and then used a move in the direction of the opponent's dodge to sweep away thousands of troops. Luo Guang's strength was well controlled, so his attack movements were very smooth. The force of the blow that split Huashan did not cause the barrel of the gun to hit the ground. It was just that the muzzle of the gun moved around and was aimed at the people around him from time to time. Those who went to the theater could not help but sweat. As soon as Laura's feet touched the ground, she immediately exerted force and did a backflip, avoiding Luo Guang's sweeping attack. However, this was just the beginning. Luo Guang was not tired at all and launched continuous attacks on Laura. One step behind, every step behind. Although Laura wanted to take the opportunity to close the distance while dodging, Luo Guang naturally would not let the other side succeed. The distance between the two was well controlled, and he would not let the other side have a chance. Stop your own attack. This made Laura, who was busy avoiding and never attacked once, feel very uncomfortable. Naturally, Susan saw Laura's predicament, and saw Luo Guang dancing vigorously without showing any sign of fatigue, so she stopped the test. That's enough in this place, force is the only criterion. At this stage, Luo Guang's performance is enough for Susan to look up to Luo Guang. Susan glanced at someone around her, and then invited Luo Guang and Hank to go to a reception room inside. Luo Guang leaned a heavy machine gun on the sofa and then sat on the sofa, while Hank stood behind Luo Guang like a loyal bodyguard, and the same was true for Susan, with Laura standing behind him. Except for these four people, no one else followed. Hank mentioned something to me about the purpose of your unit. Hank said these words with Luo Guang's permission. As the actual controller of this mercenary town, Susan naturally has to plan for the interests of her men, so she is supported by the mercenaries here. It's over. The situation in this town where many giants were confronting each other, and the incomplete town area were witnesses of that battle. After learning the purpose of Hank and the two, Susan was relieved and her eyes brightened. This was a new market that no one had entered yet. If Wu Song, Luo Guang, was just a playboy, then she would choose to work alone. If Wu Song was not the one, then she would choose to join a gang. As for why she didn't start a new business, it was because Susan knew that Hank once worked for Umbrella. A person who knew the situation could play a huge role in opening up the market. She also thought about poaching Hank directly. But Hank refused. Luo Guang nodded and waited for the other party's next words. Susan continued, "This is a new market. I am very interested in it. I would like to ask Mr. Wu how he came up with this. Is it because of Hank's previous job? It's like asking why I know a certain stock will rise sharply tomorrow." Luo Guang meant that the other party was asking whether he knew some inside information. Susan said, "I can do those things myself. After all, Mr. Wu, I already know what you want to do. If you want to steal customers, I don't think you can rob me. I don't need to steal customers. As long as you can solve the biological crisis, I don't care about the commission at all." Luo Guang's words were in line with Susan's impression of him as a wealthy man. Susan was a little surprised that the other person didn't seem to be doing these things for money, and confirmed, "Isn't Mr. Wu here for money? You've robbed all my business. How can I have any money? This is all I can do to comfort myself." Luo Guang laughed, but he couldn't deceive Susan. Monopoly is very profitable, but Susan knows about the red clause. Although the private market is still blank, based on Susan's many years of business experience, this market is still difficult to monopolize. This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. Since there is no monopoly, what Susan is pursuing at this time is a win-win situation. She said, "Fame and wealth are complementary to each other. Since Mr. Wu is in the name of fame, and I am a businessman, it is for profit. Isn't this a win-win cooperation, basic?" "Yes, cooperation is possible, but I still have the final say on my troops. If you dare to let people infiltrate my troops and let my troops deteriorate, you will have ugly words ahead, and I will sweep all your forces into the grave." Susan burst out laughing when she heard Luo Guang's straightforward words. She didn't feel that Luo Guang was offending her at all. Being of Maoxiong country's descent, she felt that Luo Guang's words were straightforward and candid. Of course, if she knew that Luo Guang's ugly words were not a joke, she might not think that Luo Guang was frank, but that Luo Guang was overestimating his abilities. Hank behind Luo Guang knew that Luo Guang was not joking, and couldn't help but recall how Luo Guang showed his hand and snatched the pickup truck outside from a rebel camp. Susan was engrossed in the business in front of her and didn't notice the strange look on Hank's face. She said, "Okay, after all, I am just a businessman. In the end, you have to make the final decision on the battle, but I am your only supplier, and asking you to help me fight GG while ensuring safety, is that okay?" "It's okay as long as it doesn't affect the battle, but if your weapons and equipment are not supplied." Luo Guang's answer was still so tactful, leaving himself a way out. "This is our problem, so I won't blame you." Susan nodded, and then she and Luo Guang continued to discuss the cooperation between the two parties in depth. In the end, the two walked out of the reception room shaking hands and laughing. Susan was having a good time talking about business this time. Suddenly she thought of a question and said, "By the way, I still don't know the name of your team." "GIMZ is the abbreviation of Grasset Mother Zombies," Luo Guang replied. Susan couldn't understand the meaning of Luo Guang's full name, and Hank, who listened to Luo Guang's explanation, sighed and said, "Ignore him, this is a temporary name." Meow, women only affect Hank's speed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 131. Chapter 128. Jack Mueller. Is this our base or storefront? Luo Guang looked at the two-story house in front of him and said, "It feels a little different from what I imagined." Hank explained, "For this town, this place is not small, and there is a small yard in front and back for us to park or conduct some simple training. After all, this is just our storefront. If we really want to train new people, it is better to go to a relatively safe country with supporting tests. Of course, for the most basic military training, we can also pay for training services, so that we don't have to buy land to build a training ground, which can save a lot of money." "I understand, I'll think about it. Now go in and see if I need to buy anything else." Luo Guang took out the key and opened the door. Luo Guang paid in advance to book this place, and asked Susan to find someone to clean it and buy some daily necessities, so it was relatively clean inside, without too much dust. The furniture had also arrived and was piled in a corner of the hall, and was not thrown in the yard to be exposed to the wind and sun. "Excuse me, is anyone here?" When Luo Guang and Hank were putting the furniture in order one by one, they heard someone knocking on the door, and then a child's voice rang out. Luo Guang asked Hank to continue to put the furniture in order, and he went to open the door. Looking down, he saw a little boy. "Who are you looking for?" "The previous owner is gone." The previous owner of the two-story house had been wiped out in a war mission, so Luo Guang was able to take over this house. This was not taking advantage of the fire. The money Luo Guang spent on buying this house would be used as a pension for the previous owner's team, and Susan would pass it on to their heirs. The little boy mustered up his courage and said, "Excuse me, are you new mercenaries? I am very familiar with this place and can show you the way here. I only need 10 dinars. Dinar is the currency of this country. In terms of exchange rate, $1 can be exchanged for hundreds of dinars. In this mercenary town, two currencies are circulated, $dollars and dinars. The former is used between mercenaries, and the latter is naturally used between mercenaries and the original residents of the town." "Well." Luo Guang looked at the little boy in front of him. He didn't look weak, so he suggested, "We still have to sort out the furniture now. Why don't you come in and help us? I'll give you 30 dinars. Because the main force of the transportation is mainly the two of them, and the work of this kind of tour guide is not stable, Luo Guang thinks that this price is already very high for the little boy in front of him." Hearing Luo Guang's words, the little boy's eyes lit up and he said, "Really? Thank you, sir." The little boy was very polite. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to help, but Luo Guang stopped him with his hand. He first explained to the little boy which furniture he was going to move and where those furniture were going to be moved. Then he asked him to pay attention to safety before letting him go to help. After Luo Guang and the other two spent more than 2 hours, the work finally came to an end. After boiling a pot of hot water, Luo Guang took out a disposable paper cup and handed it to Hank and little Jack. "Kid, what's your name? You came out to work so early to support your family. Where are your parents?" Since they were all resting, Luo Guang found a topic. "My name is Jack Mueller. My mother suffers from a chronic disease, so I have to take the responsibility of taking care of my mother." When Jack said this, he was like a grown-up man. When Luo Guang heard the other party's name, he was surprised at the coincidence of fate. Could it be that he met the son of Albert Wesker, the protagonist of the 6th generation of Resident Evil games? Thinking this in his heart, Luo Guang stared at little Jack, who was indeed somewhat similar to the 20-year-old Jack in the game. However, Luo Guang could not act as if he knew his life story very well, so he asked, "Where is your father? Did he go out to work?" Jack's eyes were filled with hatred, and he said, "I don't know who my father is, and my mother never mentions my father to me. I once asked, but my mother didn't answer me, and suddenly burst into tears, so I didn't dare to ask again." Luo Guang nodded and said, "Can your mother's chronic disease be treated?" "When my mother lived in the United States, she saw a doctor. The doctor said that although it cannot be cured, through intermittent treatment and long-term medication, my mother can live like a normal person until she is 50 or 60 years old." "No wonder you speak fluent English," Hank suddenly realized. Jack scratched his head a little embarrassedly, saying that it was all thanks to his mother. It was because of this fluent English that most new mercenaries looking for town guides would choose Jack. The mercenaries were replaced very quickly, so Jack was able to earn a little money to help support his family. "How is your mother now?" There was not much about Jack's mother in the game, so Luo Guang planned to ask in detail. Although Jack was surprised why the other party was so concerned about him and his mother, he did not think that he had anything that the other party needed, so he did not mind or hide it, and said, "Not bad, I can walk and move, and I can do some laundry and make some money." After hearing this, Luo Guang was able to make his own suggestion, "Why don't you and your mother come here to work, so that you can accompany your mother in your free time?" "Are you serious?" Jack asked in surprise, "But why are you so nice to me, sir?" "I'm your dad." Luo Guang blurted out these words. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. "What?" Hank was the first to express shock. Then he looked at Luo Guang and then Jack, and said, "You don't look like that either." "Yes, sir." Jack didn't panic because it was obvious that they had nothing in common. "Actually, we have just arrived here, and we have to find someone to clean, do laundry, cook, etc. Anyway, I think you are a pretty good guy and have a filial piety, so I plan to find your family." A stable job is rare for Jack, but Jack said, "But sir, you will leave soon, or be on the battlefield. In this case, only my mother and I will be in this house. There are also some fierce mercenaries around." Luo Guang rubbed the other party's head and said, "We are not planning to go on a mission yet, so this job will not be lost so easily. As for the safety issue, I asked Uncle Hank to take some money and ask Susan for help. That's it." Hearing what the generous Luo Guang said, Jack smiled for the first time, nodded and agreed to come to Luo Guang's place to help, and then left here and asked his mother to move here. "I haven't said anything about my salary yet," Luo Guang said to himself when he saw Jack leaving in a hurry. Hank smiled on the side and said, "Maybe being able to stay with his mother is more important to him than money." After saying that, Hank immediately regained his poker face and said, "By the way, do you really plan to invite them? There has to be someone to do some chores, right?" Luo Guang said, "That man named Jack is a good young man, or he can be trained to become an outstanding soldier." "Are you planning to let me train him?" Hank replied, realizing that the latter half of the sentence was Luo Guang's main purpose. Luo Guang said, "It will be good to train with the people who will be recruited later. It will also be good to be a janitor in the future. He may even be capable enough to inherit your mantle." About half an hour later, Jack came over with her mother, but without any luggage. "Are they really going to invite us?" Jack's mother, Katie Muller, looked at Luo Guang, who had an oriental face, and Hank, who had a poker face, and asked with a little uncertainty. "Yes, they said they were going to pay." Jack stopped mid-sentence and said to Luo Guang, "By the way, I forgot to ask just now, boss, how much salary did you pay?" "For you and your mother, the total is 1,500 dinars per month for both of you." Luo Guang's price is already a well-off price for local residents. Kaidi was surprised by Luo Guang's price, and even more felt that there was something fishy about it, and asked, "What do we need to do?" "You can do chores, cleaning, cooking, laundry, etc., right?" Luo Guang added, "Although there are not many people now, more people will join in the future, but we will also invite more people, so you don't have to worry about being too tired." "Mom, this job is good, so you don't have to run out and be bullied all the time," Jack persuaded. But Kaidi felt that this was too unreal. He took a deep breath, and just when he was about to say something, Luo Guang said, "I can also pay for you, madam, to buy medicine for chronic diseases, but I have a request. You're Jack, you have to work for me until you pay off your medical bills." The young Jack reacted quickly. Before his mother could stop him, Jack shouted, "I promise you, as long as you are willing to help my mother treat her illness." "No, Jack, you have a broader stage. You can't stay here as a handyman all your life." "Woo, you look like a bad guy now." Hank felt that Luo Guang's expression now looked like a demon who was leading people astray. "I never said I was a good person." After Luo Guang finished speaking, he looked at Jack and said, "Jack, you are still young, and I don't need a child to fight now, so after things here calm down, I need you to follow the uncle next to me for military training here, and when you grow up, you will continue to serve in our ranks until you pay off the medical expenses we paid for your mother. Of course, during your study period, during the time, we will buy medicine for your mother." "No, Jack, you can't promise him. You shouldn't grow up in a place like this, and I hope you can be a kind person." Kaidi was very moved by Luo Guang's proposal to treat herself. She wanted to keep looking at her little Jack grew up, but she didn't want her son to live in a hail of bullets all day long. Luo Guang felt that the two people in front of him were really incompatible with this war-torn country, and said, "We will not get involved in the war, our business is those biohazard incidents." The information here is relatively limited, so Luo Guang explained to them what biohazard is. Although it is not as dangerous as war, it does not mean that biohazard incidents are safe. Kaidi is a smart woman, so she understands quickly. Hank said Luo Guang was a demon, but he was also a subordinate of the demon now, so he also joined in the persuasion and said, "Madam, but where you live now, Jack can study safely, go to college, get married, and have children. Environment. Clinging to kindness will not protect him or you." Hank's words were sharp, like a sharp knife, instantly rendering Caddy speechless. Since Hank played the good cop, Luo Guang naturally had to play the bad cop role and said, "Don't say that. I think Mrs. Caddy doesn't want this either, otherwise she wouldn't teach Jack English. But madam, since Jack grew up here, he has to adapt to the environment here and teach him how to survive here. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading." Luo Guang's words made Caddy silent, and Luo Guang continued to strike while the iron was hot, saying, "Madam, you also mentioned that you hope Jack will become a kind person, which is exactly what our team needs, because the purpose of our team is to do kind things." "Mom, they are right." In fact, when Luo Guang said that he would buy medicine for his mother, he wanted to agree to Luo Guang immediately, but his mother said no first. Of course, if his mother really didn't want to do those things herself, Jack himself would definitely not insist on doing them. Hank was talking about reality, Luo Guang was talking about reason, and Jack was expressing his own will, so Mrs. Caddy finally gave in and agreed to Luo Guang's suggestion. Then she touched Jack's head with a doting look and said, "It's your mother who is sorry for you. It's not mom's fault, it's dad's fault." "Yes, it's your dad's fault." Caddy was about to scold Jack, but Luo Guang said first, "But Jack, maybe your dad has his own difficulties, so he left you two behind." Jack also knew that his quick words just now stepped on his mother's minefield, and he couldn't help but thank Luo Guang for helping him out. Caddy actually knew that Jack's father was indeed not kind, but who made her really love that man, even if he left without saying goodbye and left her and her son, she still couldn't hate that handsome man in her heart. "Hank, you accompany them to get their things from home first. We still have an empty room here, so they can just settle down here." After saying that, Luo Guang looked at Jack and Caddy. Jack and Katie would not object to their boss's orders, and it would be safer for them to move here. Otherwise, they would easily attract the envy of people around them with a monthly salary of 1,500 dinars. Watching Hank take Jack out, Luo Guang breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at Jack, who had not yet grown up, Luo Guang felt like he was playing a development game. Just when Jack grew up and Hank was about to retire, his team could smoothly achieve a new and old replacement. Thinking of this, Luo Guang turned and went to the small yard behind. He was going to contact Susan to prepare some teaching materials for Jack, and also to buy the medicines Katie needed. Meow, Jack's mother's English name is Candy Muller, and her Chinese name is Jean Muller, or Katie Muller. The latter is chosen here. It is easy to have ambiguity when a single word is placed in a sentence. After all, foreigners will not add an A in front when calling a single word name. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 132. Chapter 129 Recruiting People. With the help of a strong and reputable intermediary, the recruitment information Luo Guang sent out quickly received a reply. After asking little Jack to learn how to use a computer and print out the resume in the reply, Luo Guang and Hank came together. Make your selection. After first screening out those who had no ability and overestimated their capabilities before submitting their resumes when they saw the high salary, Luo Guang and Hank no longer had many resumes in their hands. "They are basically people aged 35 and above," Luo Guang said while checking. Hank, who is over 35 years old, replied, "The age of 35 has just reached a balance between body and technology. If you look at this person, he is very good." Hank handed over a resume. The person in it was a woman, 38 years old, a special forces member from Gaul. She was a main attacker. She was proficient in various individual weapons and soldier training. In all aspects, she fit Luo Guang's profile. The request is that she hopes Luo Guang can give her enough money so that her son can have a good enough life. Why is she raising a family again? Besides, it costs a lot to raise a child. You see, the aristocratic school her son is currently studying in is almost as valuable as the members of many mercenary teams outside. If I have this money, I will give it to you. It's not better to buy equipment. Although Luo Guang has a lot of money, he has lived alone for many years before time travel and has long learned to be prudent with money, so he feels that this person is not a good deal. After passing that person, Luo Guang took out another resume. "The one I have is from South Africa, codenamed Shona. His hometown is probably in the Republic of Zimbabwe. He graduated from the Department of Medicine at Harvard University. He was 27 years old and left the army because he disagreed with the army's philosophy on viruses." Luo Guang read out some basic information about this person and continued, "In his opinion, if the virus can be controlled, death will become less scary. His understanding of the virus lies in its positive effect on the human body. And try to expand this effect, but the military wants to completely eliminate the virus. Which planet's army is he talking about? No country would really think so, right? Hank's words were full of prejudice, but Luo Guang did not refute. So this person might be an undercover agent sent by the government, or a surveillance agent. Luo Guang thought of this possibility. Hank nodded and asked, "Do you think you can recruit this person?" "Yes, battlefield scientists are also needed by your team." Luo Guang then added, "Rejecting will only allow those high-level government officials to use more secretive methods to monitor us." After speaking, Luo Guang put his resume on the other side and continued to check the remaining resumes. However, no suitable candidate was found among the remaining people. "I didn't expect that only one suspected undercover person passed in the end." Luo Guang's tone did not sound downcast. "Everything is difficult at the beginning. Without a reputation, they cannot attract many high-quality talents." "Boss, these are the candidates sent by Boss Susan." Little Jack brought over a bunch of information. These people were mercenaries introduced by Susan, but they were not Susan's people, so Luo Guang also it will cost you an introduction fee. The money spent is different, and there is also background investigation information. This is also the information Luo Guang asked Susan to provide at a higher price. Hank also picked up a stack and looked at it, and said, "These people are basically retired from the special forces, and their combat capabilities are very reliable. Even if we only look at the background, we can't seem to judge those people's views on the biohazard. That's why we have to give priority to people with experience in biohazards. By the way, Hank, how is the situation over there? Have you contacted your former teammates?" Luo Guang actually doesn't worry about other people's loyalty. At worst, he can give them some T. Veronica virus, special version, but it's not a good thing to do so, so Luo Guang only uses it for last resort. Hank replied, "I have sent out the code and contacted several old subordinates. Although they remain neutral on the antibiochemical matter, they are still willing to come and join us." "They're doing it because of you, right?" Luo Guang guessed. Hank nodded and agreed with Luo Guang. Although Hank has the unlucky title of Death, people from USS or UBCS who know Hank will give him the greatest respect, and all of this comes from Hank. Personal charm, excellent combat ability and professionalism. Luo Guang did not show any disgust towards the members of Umbrella Company on the surface. Instead, he asked with great interest, "Who are those people?" "The first one is my former assistant, codenamed Lone Wolf. He is a pretty outstanding young man who usually has no sense of presence. He is good at sneaking in and fighting in disguise. Like me, he is a serious and responsible guy who can also handle paperwork. Give it to him." The thing that Hank likes best about Lone Wolf is that he doesn't resist paperwork. How did he leave Umbrella? Why? Can he really be trusted? Aren't you afraid that he was sent by Umbrella? Although Luo Guang does not discriminate against Umbrella's origins, these things need to be confirmed in advance. Well, who knows that betrayal is included in Umbrella's corporate culture and tradition. Hank naturally understood these things and had asked about them long ago. He said, "He is also a survivor of the Raccoon City incident. At that time, I was carrying out the task of snatching the G virus from a man named William, and their task was to clean up the task of the Raccoon City Umbrella Corporation that caused the biochemical crisis to leak. In simple terms, it was to kill people and burn evidence." This chapter is not yet finished. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content later. Luo Guang guessed, "They are also evidence that needs to be destroyed in the eyes of Umbrella." Hank nodded and continued, "Yes, Umbrella did not arrange any evacuation routes for them. It was a correct but ruthless decision. However, Umbrella obviously underestimated our USS. In addition to my adjutant, there is a guy named Victor who is willing to join us. His real name is Makoto Suzuki. He is also a member of the USS who escaped from Raccoon City. He is of Japanese descent. It is said that his ancestors were IGA ninjas. He is agile. I have practiced with him several times when I was training under him. Some of Victor's combat skills are even better than mine. Is it trustworthy? In addition to explaining the reason why they fled from Umbrella, Hank also gave Luo Guang the reason why they were not sent by Umbrella. Therefore, Luo Guang finally needed to know whether they could be trusted, or to be more precise, how much he could trust them. Lone Wolf has been following me all the time and is trustworthy. As for Victor, he has been asking to work with me when he was in the USS. He is a person who pursues strength and pursues the strong, and I am half of his mentor. If you can fight with him to convince him, I think his loyalty can be guaranteed. The people Hank mentioned are all people Hank thinks he can rely on. Since Hank said so, Luo Guang would naturally not refuse these two people and said, then call them over. Are there any others? Got it? There are no others. The people I screened out are either bomb maniacs or have some psychological problems. The two people on Hank's side, plus the person who submitted a resume before, finally raised enough for a 4-person team, which can be regarded as meeting the minimum standard. Luo Guang continued to check the candidates given by Susan, and there was Carlos. From Susan's investigation, Carlos really returned to South America as a mercenary after leaving Raccoon City, and has been doing mercenary work since then. Although he had no special forces background, Carlos's experience in rescuing civilians on the battlefield just met Luo Guang's requirements, so Carlos's letter of introduction was sent to Luo Guang. Yes, Luo Guang asked Susan to find people who still had a conscience and became mercenaries just to make a living. This was also a strategy to balance Hank's Umbrella background personnel. After putting Carlos' information on the side of the previous battlefield scientist Juana, Luo Guang and Hank continued to check the remaining people. A few days passed. During this period, except for the people on Hank's side, Luo Guang called each other one by one to communicate and exchange ideas, confirm each other's ideas and have a preliminary understanding of each other's character, and then gathered them all on his side. The first thing was everyone's self-introduction, and then Luo Guang reconfirmed their willingness to join his team and their attitude towards the biochemical crisis. Those people came, so naturally they would not withdraw temporarily. Most of the questions that should be asked were also asked clearly on the phone. Now the main problem is the man named Victor, who is looking at Luo Guang with indifference. Everyone came to the small courtyard, leaving a space in the middle and forming a circle. Have you been waiting for a long time? Luo Guang asked Hank to tell Victor in advance about the boss's appointment with him, so that the other party would be mentally prepared, lest Victor think that the boss wanted to kill him to scare the monkeys. So Luo Guang used the name of the appointment as a test. After all, Hank said that Victor was better than Hank himself in some aspects, so as the boss, Luo Guang had to see it in person. Victor stood up silently, came to the middle station, and stood about 3 meters in front of Luo Guang. The other party had a cool ninja style, wearing a black combat uniform with a hood. According to Hank, the outfit was customized by Umbrella, but Victor had removed the USS logo on it. No need to start the signal, just go when you are ready. Luo Guang wanted to see the strength of the person Hank praised. However, Victor just stood there calmly without making any move. His attention was also on Luo Guang, who looked careless at the moment, and he did not take the initiative to attack. The people around looked at Luo Guang and the other person and looked at each other in bewilderment. Only Hank and Lone Wolf knew that Victor did not take the initiative to attack because his fighting style was to kill with a sneak attack, while in a head-on battle, he tended to strike back and look for opportunities to counterattack. Luo Guang had already obtained the opponent's intelligence from Hank in advance, so Luo Guang did not force the opponent to take the first step. His eyes were solemn, and he put away the appearance he had just pretended to let the opponent relax his vigilance, and launched an attack. Luo Guang rushed towards Victor with his legs, and Victor saw the opportunity and kicked Luo Guang in the chest faster than Luo Guang expected. Victor was wearing thick-soled military boots, and with his extraordinary strength, if a normal person was kicked by Victor, he would fall to the ground and look for a doctor. However, Luo Guang was not that kind of person. He blocked with his arms crossed. Beyond Victor's expectation, Luo Guang blocked Victor's attack with both hands, and he also maintained the momentum of charging. In addition, Luo Guang's charging speed was faster than Victor thought, and his kicking leg was blocked and pushed back before it was fully straightened. Victor was not prepared for Luo Guang's strong force, but he reacted quickly. He took advantage of Luo Guang's force to charge at him, kicked back, and opened up the distance between him and Luo Guang again. The people around were surprised. It was already extraordinary boldness to catch this powerful kick with his hands, and he could actually push the opponent back, which made some people speechless. Just that one move was enough to make Victor put away his contempt for Luo Guang and put Luo Guang on the same level as himself. Luo Guang stopped and did not choose to charge again, but steadily approached Victor. The two men moved closer to each other, and Victor took the lead in attacking. Victor, who had no weapons in his hands, preferred to attack with his legs, which were more powerful and could defeat the enemy with one blow. He kicked Luo Guang in the abdomen with his legs. Luo Guang leaned sideways with both hands, and was about to rely on his strong strength to forcibly grab the opponent's kicking foot, but unfortunately he caught nothing, otherwise Luo Guang could have ended the fight quickly. Victor's attack missed, and he had already retracted his legs and kicked again, but Luo Guang avoided it again. However, Victor's attack was not over yet, and he kicked again, but Luo Guang still dodged it by leaning back, retracting his legs and changing his feet, and Victor kicked again. Victor still wanted to suppress Luo Guang, but Luo Guang felt that it would be too embarrassing for him as a boss if he continued like this, so he slightly released his ability, bent his arms and elbows, and hit the knee of Victor's attacking leg. It was both a block and a counter-attack. It was a fighting method that Luo Guang absorbed from a Southeast Asian martial art called Bonkasila, which specializes in hitting joints. Although Victor had some strength left in his kick to be more flexible, Luo Guang was faster this time than when he tried to grab his leg before, so Luo Guang's elbow successfully hit Victor's knee. Victor, who had just kicked sideways, retracted his leg with the force of Luo Guang's downward attack. He was about to regain his upright posture when he saw Luo Guang's turn and elbow strike, so he immediately raised his arms to block his face and successfully blocked Luo Guang's attack. This was quite a lot of power. Although he blocked with both arms, Luo Guang's power was not small, and he directly hit Victor's body to one side. Luo Guang attacked from top to bottom, taking advantage of the opponent's body center of gravity shifting, kicked backwards, and kicked down to Victor's knee. Victor reacted quickly and did not rush. He decisively gave up attacking Luo Guang, whose back was wide open, and chose to retreat and adjust his body shape. However, after a few moves, Victor realized that the opponent's physical fitness was completely superior to his. If it was really a fight on the battlefield, he believed that he would not lose to Luo Guang, but now Luo Guang was the boss, so he would be at a disadvantage because of the prohibition of killing moves, so he did not feel frustrated. That's it, after all, this is just a small test, and there is no point in fighting further. Luo Guang naturally understood this, so he stopped while he was ahead and let Victor, the arrogant guy, know that he was not a soft persimmon. And from the faces of the people around him, it can be seen that Luo Guang's performance this time was also good, and he finally succeeded in suppressing these unruly guys. I rehearsed this fight with my friend, so I didn't write much last night, and it was late today. By the way, my friend will choose to attack the exposed back meow. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 133. Chapter 130. A message from Jill. After completing the initial recruitment of combatants, Luo Guang confirmed with MRS Caddy whether the work could be completed and whether more people were needed to help. MRS Caddy was concerned about the boss's wallet and said that it was not tiring with Jack's help, so Luo Guang did not recruit anyone, but asked little Jack to pay more attention to his mother's situation and not let her get tired. On the other hand, Hank led the newly recruited combatants to get to know each other and to conduct simple team grouping. According to the original plan, 4 people formed a team, and 4 teams formed a team to jointly perform antibiochemical tasks, but now the number of people is slightly insufficient, so there are some changes in the personnel configuration. First, Hank led Lone Wolf and Victor in a team of 3. Victor was very excited to hear that he could be in a team with Hank, and after Luo Guang heard the news, he silently wished Lone Wolf and Victor good luck in his heart. Carlos and the battlefield scientist named Shuana came together. They seemed to get along very well and soon got close to each other. So the 2 of them, together with the other 2 people, formed a 4-person team. The other 2 were female medical soldier Sherry Clow and male demolitionist Leopold Camus. They were from the same special forces in Gaul, not a couple. They had just retired not long ago, and this was their first time to join the mercenary team. In addition to the 5 people in the above 2 groups, there were 2 men and 3 women, a total of 5 people, forming the 3rd team. Among these 5 people, one is Chinese, named Wang Shuhong, who used to work in the peacekeeping force. He can speak Chinese, English, Portuguese, and Spanish, and is familiar with the position of assaulter. The other 4 people are familiar with positions such as breakthrough and demolition, which are very offensive positions, so Luo Guang plans to let Hank train them more on how to clean up biochemical infections, focusing on a quick cleanup. Another week has passed, and there are still no new people joining, but the entire base is already quite decent. Hank and his team were practicing, while Luo Guang was replying to text messages online. Although Luo Guang's current GIMZ is not well known, it has sounded the first voice of the people's antibiochemical crisis, so many people have found Luo Guang through the email address he posted online to ask for details. Among them are pharmaceutical companies, some special departments of governments of various countries, as well as job application letters from like-minded people, or sponsors, etc. Luo Guang replied to these contacts one by one, selecting available people or organizations. Luo Guang never thought of supporting GIMZ by himself. There is strength in numbers. To succeed in the antibiochemical crisis, more kind people must support it. Just as Luo Guang was replying to the cooperation invitation from the South African Intelligence Department, Luo Guang's Nokia phone vibrated. Luo Guang didn't know many people in this world. People who had his Nokia phone number were basically the protagonists in the biochemical crisis game. He picked it up and saw that the phone screen showed a text message from Jill. "Dear, I need help because of the word limit." Jill's message was sent in several messages. It was not that Jill was in trouble, but that Luo Guang was asked to help save someone. This story starts with Leon, whom Luo Guang had met once in Raccoon City. After Leon escaped from Raccoon City, he was taken in by the troops around Raccoon City. After a physical examination and questioning, Leon was spotted by the intelligence department under the National Intelligence Agency of the Lighthouse State. Since then, Leon has been receiving professional agent training, house arrest and surveillance, in Washington. Despite this, Leon is not completely oblivious to what is happening outside. He uses the government's internal intelligence network to collect and study various news reports about Umbrella Corporation. But as mentioned before, the Lighthouse state government is not so confident about Leon for the time being, so the information he obtains is filtered through layers. One day, Leon turned on his computer to check as usual and found that a mass suicide of prisoners had occurred on an island called Sina Island. The possibility of such a thing will not be discussed for the time being. In Leon's view, Sina Island, like Raccoon City, is a place ruled by Umbrella Corporation. The residents on the island are basically employees of Umbrella Corporation. This collective suicide incident is more likely to be Umbrella Corporation's usual style of clearing evidence. Therefore, Leon, who was forbidden to go out privately, commissioned his friend, a private detective named Ake Thompson, to investigate the suicide incident on the island and confirm whether the collective suicide incident on the island was a new conspiracy of Umbrella Corporation. For safety, the two agreed on a time as a deadline. If Ake did not leave Sina Island safely and contacted Leon, Leon would find someone to rescue Ake Thompson on Sina Island. Therefore, when the deadline came, Leon, who did not receive the message from his friend Ake, immediately contacted Claire. But at this time, Claire was busy preparing for a lawsuit with Umbrella Corporation, and she was not at ease with Steve going to rescue alone, so she asked Jill if she had time. The final result was that Jill, who was preparing to raid the Paris biological and chemical weapons factory, found Luo Guang. As for why Jill knew that Luo Guang was free, it was because Jill knew through his connections that Luo Guang from the Red Claws was on vacation. Because they were just text messages, Luo Guang did not tell Jill about Wu Song's fake identity. He replied to Jill that he had received the message and would find a way to save him. Private Detective Ake Thompson and Sina Island, these two pieces of information reminded Luo Guang of many things. They were characters in a game called Ghost Under the Gun. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Although this game is not named Resident Evil, the plot of this game is also included in the Resident Evil worldview, which is a spin-off, so Luo Guang has an impression of this game. It's just that this game is boring to play, so Luo Guang doesn't remember much, including some special biological weapons. Luo Guang hid his mobile phone and didn't rush to arrange Hank and others to rescue immediately, but instead looked for the location of Sina Island and the country it belonged to. The country to which Sina Island belongs is Gaul. GIMZ has no law enforcement power, and the entire island has been bought by Umbrella, so it is more difficult for GIMZ to carry out tasks through official channels. The Red Claws are still cleaning up virus-infected objects on Banoi Island and surrounding islands, and they don't have enough manpower. As for the Red Claws Special Operations Team, they are on vacation. However, Luo Guang and the head of the Donald family, cops, are good friends after all, so Luo Guang asked them to help GIMZ so that it can intervene in this matter. Let GIMZ have a little color of the X organization, and it can also make the newborn GIMZ grow better. After doing all this, Luo Guang closed the computer web page, locked the computer, and walked out of the office to find everyone who was listening to Hank's antibiochemical lecture. Boss Hank stood up straight and saluted. Luo Guang nodded and asked, "How is the teaching and training going? Can we go on a mission?" Luo Guang's words made some people very excited. These days, they were either doing antibiochemical training or listening to lectures, which made some people start to itch. And little Jack, who was also listening to the class, left the small yard very sensibly and returned to the house. After Jack left, Hank replied, "The situation is good. We can go on the mission at any time, but we need to understand the mission content first, confirm what we need to bring, and let Susan prepare the equipment and plane in advance." Luo Guang understood and led everyone into the conference room. The conference room is not large, so there are no seats. After closing the door, Luo Guang began to explain the content of the mission. It happened that this incident was related to Umbrella Corporation, so Luo Guang could use this opportunity to observe Victor and Lone Wolf, and see how far GIMZ, a newly established small unit, can do in this incident while running in everyone. The target location this time is Sina Island. "I think you should have heard of this name, Hank." Hank recalled and nodded and replied, "I have transported things there before. If we go there, we need to take a plane to the nearby area and then transfer to a helicopter or boat to land on the island. The situation there is a bit like Raccoon City. The residents on the island are all employees of Umbrella. But do we have the power to enforce the law there? I have asked someone to help. The power there is strong enough and they will get a permit for us. Hank, you arrange the departure there, and I will pay for it. Then, Luo Guang brought the topic back to the mission introduction and said, the mission is very simple. First, go to the island to find a private detective named Ake Thompson and rescue him. Second, collect evidence of Umbrella's crimes. Third, destroy Umbrella's research materials on Sina Island. I will send you photos of Ake Thompson later. As for cleaning up the biological and chemical infections on the island, we will hand them back to the Gaulish troops for processing after obtaining the evidence. Are these 3 tasks prioritized? Lone Wolf asked. Rescue is the top priority, the other 2 are at the same level, but I think you can probably complete these tasks along the way. There is no conflict. If it is a rescue mission, does that mean we need to fight in secret? If the island is full of Umbrella employees, it is normal that there are spies of the company inside, Victor asked. Luo Guang shook his head and said, there is intelligence showing that there is a high probability of a biochemical crisis in that place. It is suspected that many biochemical monsters that appeared in Raccoon City have also appeared on the island, so you don't have to fight in secret, but you must be fully prepared for the battle. The crowd was a little chaotic, especially those who had not personally experienced the biochemical crisis. Quiet down. After Luo Guang asked everyone to calm down, he continued, those biochemical monsters are just pediatrics. You can ask Hank, the old hand, for specific advice on how to deal with them. However, there are still a few tricky points in this mission. There is information showing that there is a Tyrant-type biochemical weapons production factory in that place. Hank explained the Tyrant to everyone, so some people's faces have become solemn and began to think about how many individual rocket launchers to bring over. Boss Wu, do you have a specific number in your information? Carlos raised his hand to speak. Unfortunately, no, but it is said that those Tyrants are inferior versions, and their outer coats are also smuggled and not bulletproof. Luo Guang said this, and added in his heart that the sleeping Tyrant is not a low-quality product. That's good. Hank nodded. He was worried that those Tyrants would wear bulletproof coats. Seeing that there were no other questions, Luo Guang continued, in addition, you also need to pay attention to a biological weapon. It is a guy called the Cleaner. They look like apes. Because their arms are too long, they move in a half squat, which is very easy to identify. Apes, with long arms, so they are high-speed and flexible close combat biological weapons, Hank guessed. No, they are biological weapons developed by Umbrella to replace the USS and UBCS troops that have suffered huge losses in manpower. They have an IQ close to that of humans, can work in a team, can use firearms, night vision goggles and other tools, and can drive, etc. They can be said to be a very good biological weapon. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. Luo Guang's words are scary, but this has aroused the competitive spirit of the 3 former USS and Carlos, the former UBCS. And the others are thinking about how much defense level of bulletproof vests to wear. Boss, how accurate is this information? Hank heard Luo Guang's words with words like suspected and possible. It's just so-so, Luo Guang said, it was provided by the person who commissioned me. Luo Guang didn't think Hank and his friends would verify this with Jill and his friends. After that, Luo Guang told them some more information about this mission, and then asked them to disband the list of equipment to be submitted for the mission. However, Luo Guang asked Hank to stay first. What's wrong, Wu? Hank didn't call the boss again because the others were not there. Luo Guang was explaining and thinking at the same time, and finally decided to tell the story of the sleeping tyrant. Death God Hank, leading the team to perform the mission will always go wrong, resulting in huge losses for the team. Luo Guang said something without a beginning or an end. Hank glanced at Luo Guang and said, Boss, you should just speak directly. I'm thinking, if I speak out, will you encounter another unexpected situation? Boss, are you talking about fatalism or something like that? I don't believe in fate, so boss, just speak out. Hank understood that Luo Guang had another important piece of information that he hadn't said. Since Hank didn't believe it, Luo Guang said, codenamed Sleeping God, it is a tyrant specially developed on Sina Island. Why are those mass-produced tyrants I just mentioned so weak, and the code is not bulletproof? It's because the leader of the island embezzled the money allocated to him by the company and used it to develop the Sleeping God tyrant. I understand. What are the characteristics of this tyrant? I don't know. There is no combat data of the Sleeping God tyrant in the intelligence over there. That's troublesome. Hank thought hard about the countermeasures and said. Anyway, that's the case, you guys do your best. Luo Guang could only say this. If he said too much details, he couldn't explain it to Hank. After all, his identity is now a peace-loving anti-biochemical organization boss. Okay, I will be ready to fight the tyrant. Then I will go out and prepare the purchase list first, Hank said and left the meeting room. Asterisk. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 134. Chapter 131, Sina Island Rescue Mission, Part 1. The next day, Hank and his team were fully armed and were sitting on the boat to Sina Island. At this time, because Hank and his team were using the name of the Gaulish military, the tactical suits they wore were still the ones customized by Luo Guang, but the armbands on them were attached with the logo of a certain Marine Corps of Gaul with Velcro. For mercenaries, this situation is actually a good thing, because mercenaries are not protected by international conventions, and their bosses don't force everyone to wear the logo of their own troops for publicity anyway, so everyone has no complaints and happily accepts the fact of wearing the logo of other teams. Sherry Clo and Pold Camus in Carlos' team were once members of the Gaulish Special Forces. They were very surprised that the Gaulish military would let the mercenaries wear the honorary Marine Corps shoulder straps, so they asked Hank, the leader of the team for this mission, with irrepressible curiosity. Google search Furtkin. Hank, who was in the mission state, had a cold face and looked even more difficult to get along with. Hearing Shwerui and the others' questions, Hank replied coldly, "The boss has his own way, otherwise he wouldn't and couldn't pull together a civilian team to do anti-biological." Although Carlos left the company not long after joining UBCS, he still knew the famous death god in the USS, coupled with his slightly frivolous personality, so Carlos was not scared off by Hank's cold tone, and continued the conversation, asking, "Captain Hank, do you know the boss's background?" Hank took a look and said, "The specific situation is unclear, and that's not something we should inquire about, but the boss once mentioned that he was determined to do this because of the Raccoon City incident." Although Hank didn't explain, from the second half of Hank's words, others understood that their boss might be related to the Raccoon City incident. He might be a survivor of the Raccoon City incident, or he might have relatives and friends who died in Raccoon City. But that was Luo Guang's external statement. What really made Luo Guang decide to establish his own organization was what he saw and heard on Banoi Island. This was the first time Luo Guang felt the disaster brought by the biochemical crisis to people, and now Luo Guang also has people he cares about in this world. For Jill, Luo Guang always has to do something, and this GIMZ unit is his most important first attempt. "I saw the island, there are zombies at the port, and it is confirmed that a biochemical crisis has occurred," the lone wolf who was driving the boat shouted to the passengers who were chatting behind him. Hank picked up the AGA-2 assault rifle in his hand, stood up, and said, "Pick up your mood and get ready to start the mission." Yes, everyone also put away their playfulness, picked up their own equipment and weapons, and prepared to carry out the mission. For this mission, the GIMZ troops will be divided into 3 groups to carry out the mission. Team 1, the Death Squad led by Hank, is familiar with Umbrella's affairs and knows where Umbrella usually builds biochemical factories and research institutes, So their mission goal is to collect evidence of Umbrella's crimes and destroy Umbrella's research materials on the island. According to the information provided by the boss, Hank's team did not blindly go directly to the suspected location to find Umbrella's factories or research institutes. Because of the collective suicide of prisoners in the prison on Sina Island, Hank suspected that there would be evidence of Umbrella's crimes in the prison, so the death squad set the prison on the edge of the town as their first investigation point. As for finding the factory and research institute, they only need to collect evidence and destroy research materials. As for blowing up the factory or research institute, Hank and his team do not need to do it. This is because the GIMZ troops always have to leave some things for the Gaul government to observe and study. And as long as the production materials and research materials of the factory are destroyed, the Gaul military will not be able to produce usable biochemical weapons even if they take down the production line in the biochemical weapons factory. The second team is the Angel team led by Carlos. The name of the team was decided by Carlos to correspond to Hank's death team. Their mission is to find the private detective Ake Thompson and rescue him. At the same time, if the second team encounters other survivors on the island, they will rescue them and hand them over to the third team for custody. The third team is the Homo sapiens team led by Wang Shuhong. The name is also to correspond to the other two teams. The three teams just represent heaven, earth, and hell. Their task is to carry out defense tasks at the port on land, build positions, guard ships, and wait for the Angel team to hand over the survivors to themselves for protection. The third team was a little disappointed with this task. They were all attackers and they thought they could do a big job in this mission. However, the task of guarding the ship and accommodating and arranging the survivors is also a heavy responsibility, so the people of the third team will still take this task seriously. The port is next to the town on the island, so they don't worry about not having the opportunity to shoot. The members of the Homo sapiens team half crouched at the edge of the bow, set up their weapons, and waited for the ship to slow down before starting to shoot at several zombies at the edge of the port, clearing a space for everyone to land. When the Homo sapiens team had cleared the zombies at the edge, the ship also docked. The Homo sapiens team also took the lead in landing with weapons and began to clear the staggering zombies in the port. They are just some ordinary zombies. Hank observed the situation of the zombies that were knocked down and said to himself. After confirming that they were the same type as those seen in Raccoon City, Hank was relieved to let all members of the third team, who were facing the biochemical crisis for the first time, take charge of the task of guarding the ship. Cleaned up Wang Shuhong led the team to quickly clean up the zombies wandering in the port, cleared space for the construction of the position later, and reported to Hank. Received after Hank answered, he looked at Carlos and said, "Then according to the original task allocation, we will look for the Umbrella Company's research facilities and factories on the island, and you will search for rescue targets in the town." Carlos was holding the M401 assault rifle that he was used to, equipped with a holographic sight, RIS handguard, small grip, laser indicator, and tactical light. Hearing Hank's words, he nodded. The rescue mission was more suitable for him as a former UBCS. Hank then gave Carlos and Wang Shuhong a few words, and then took Lone Wolf and Victor to the prison in Sina Island. They did not shoot rashly and waste bullets along the way. They chose to ignore the zombies that were not in the way and directly bypassed them, so the speed of movement was quite fast. Carlos greeted Wang Shuhong, and the two teams gathered together. Carlos did not lead the team to the town immediately, because the battle that had just happened at the port attracted the zombies and other virus-infected bodies near the port in the town to the gunshots, and they were gradually surrounding the port. Wang Shuhong saw that the zombies were not moving fast, so he suggested that Carlos leave first and they could deal with it themselves. But Carlos disagreed and said, "Don't underestimate these zombies. I am also a survivor of Raccoon City. I once carried out the task of blocking the zombies with the Raccoon City Police Department and the Lighthouse National Military, but we failed at that time. These slow-moving zombies are not scary, but they can serve as meat shields for other fast-moving biochemical monsters. But won't this affect your rescue mission goals? Wang Shuhong did not underestimate those zombies, but he felt that Carlos had more important tasks to deal with first, so as not to fail to rescue the rescue target due to a little time difference. Carlos thought so and said, "There are not many residents on the island compared to Raccoon City. A few thousand residents are not as many bullets as we brought. Firing here can attract zombies in the town, which will let the survivors in the town know that rescue is coming and relieve the survival pressure of the survivors inside. In this way, the rescue target will have a higher chance of holding on until we find him." Wang Shuhong raised his gun and aimed at the zombies that entered the attack range, and replied, "Since you have thought about it, then welcome to join the first shooting competition." Hearing Wang Shuhong's words, several people also shouted excitedly, took several ammunition boxes from the boat and went ashore, and placed them in several key defensive positions to form crossfire against the zombies coming from the town. Everyone took their positions and loaded their bullets. With the order of Wang Shuhong, the captain of the Homo sapiens team responsible for the defense mission, everyone started shooting, harvesting the zombies that entered the shooting range through rapid and accurate bursts. On the other side, Hank and his team were moving forward quickly. They did not have any conversations when they entered the mission state. The communication between the team members was basically completed with tactical gestures. In addition, there was a lot of gunfire at the port, so they moved forward very quickly and did not encounter any trouble. In this mission, Victor did not carry any firearms except pistols. He held a short straight knife of about 20 centimeters in one hand and a Glock 21 pistol that was newly released in 1999 and used .45 ACP bullets in the other hand. In addition, Victor also carried a black-painted Desert Eagle pistol, which was a common weapon during his time in the USS. As a scout of the team, he was leading the way at the front of the team. He had never fired a gun. With the short straight knife in his hand, he quickly and silently harvested the zombies blocking the road like a ghost. The zombies in the town were not dense. Victor kept his pace and moved swiftly. Every knife could accurately penetrate the vulnerable part of the zombie's head and kill it with one shot. Suddenly, 3 zombie dogs jumped out of the alley. Victor dodged the first one and bent down to cut the second zombie dog in the belly. The third zombie dog was shot dead in mid-air by the lone wolf. Victor turned around and killed the first zombie dog with a knife, and then killed the second zombie dog. Then he looked at the lone wolf and said coldly, "There is no need to shoot. I can solve it alone." I'm sorry. The lone wolf also understood Victor's character, so he didn't refute or say nonsense like a team should help each other. Victor just complained like this, and his starting point was that the lone wolf's shooting would attract more zombies, not complaining about the lone wolf solving his own prey. "Hurry up and move forward, otherwise the zombies will surround us." Hank, as the captain, gave a direct order. Victor and the lone wolf nodded in succession and continued to move forward. Back to Carlos, after clearing nearly 1,000 zombies, there were not many zombies that could be attracted by the gunshots. Wang Shuhong breathed a sigh of relief, flexed his hands, and said to Carlos beside him, "Thanks, Carlos. If you weren't here, we would be in big trouble." At this time, Wang Shuhong couldn't help but feel lucky that Carlos, a survivor of Raccoon City, was here, otherwise he might have died here just now. As Carlos mentioned before, the zombies move very slowly, but the zombie dogs mixed in the zombie group are very fast. In addition, the zombie dogs still retain a certain IQ and know how to use zombies as human shields or use ports. The cargo on board served as a bunker, so the zombie dogs once approached within 5 meters of the temporary defense line. This chapter is not finished yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. This distance is already very dangerous. With the speed of those zombie dogs, they can pounce on the defenders in a second or two. In this case, it is likely to cause a chain reaction and lead to the collapse of the entire front. Because the mission was to hold on, The person in charge at the beginning was Wang Shuhong, the captain of the third team responsible for this mission. But because the situation was urgent, Carlos temporarily took over the baton of the two teams, organized the team members to retreat in batches, shortened the width of the temporary defense line, and at the same time allowed the zombie dogs to cross a road without any bunkers before jumping on people. Carlos was directing his teammates to replenish ammunition and prepare to set off for rescue. When he heard Wang Shuhong's words, he turned around and replied, "You're welcome, but those hunters actually jumped out of the sea, which was beyond my expectation. Hunters are bred using amphibian genes. Normally, they should not be able to soak in seawater. However, it seems that after being modified by the virus, hunters can now move around in seawater for a short period of time, so they will no longer be able to swim in seawater." Carlos and others suddenly jumped out of the sea to attack from the side, catching Wang Shuhong and others by surprise. Fortunately, the experienced Carlos immediately turned his gun when he heard an abnormal sound coming from the side, took aim, and eliminated the hunter who intended to sneak attack the closest to Wang Shuhong, and suppressed the other hunter. That's why Wang Shuhong, who survived, expressed his gratitude. "Carlos, your magazine Shona also used an M401 assault rifle, so he took it for Carlos when he was replenishing his own ammunition magazine." Carlos thanked him, took the magazine, replaced the empty magazine on his body, and said, "Are you ready?" "Preparations are complete and ready to go at any time." After Shona finished speaking, Shwerui and the two behind him also nodded. Upon seeing this, Carlos said goodbye to the Homo sapiens team and walked into the town with his team members, while Wang Shuhong led his team to start building a defensive position. There will be meow tonight. O equals mathematical intersection symbol omega mathematical intersection symbol equals M. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 135. Chapter 132, Rescue Mission on Sina Island, Part 2. Carlos led his men and advanced in a 1-2-1 formation. After the defensive battle at the port, there were only a few zombies left on the street. Carlos saw that the few remaining zombies were either crushed under the car or had only half of their bodies left. The zombies were waving their hands, as if they were asking Carlos for help, but Carlos just glanced at the zombies and ignored them after confirming that they would not threaten him, and did not even kill them. Our random search is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Does the captain have a plan for how to find that Ake Thompson? Google search Furtkin. Walking to the central square of the town, Shwerui wanted to know if Carlos had a plan. Suna, holding an MP5 submachine gun, also wanted to know Carlos' plan and nodded. He was more scientific in his thinking and did not like to search without a plan. Carlos, who was walking in the front, replied, "I asked the boss for his opinion on this matter. He asked us to look for the crashed helicopter and the port. No living people were seen at the port, so Captain, you led us to the rising smoke." Only then did Shana realize that Carlos was not leading everyone to search for rescue targets aimlessly. Carlos nodded. Although he didn't know why the boss thought that Ake Thompson would escape by helicopter, it was better to have a starting point for the search than to lead people to search everywhere. Unlike the death squad, Carlos and his team did not have an excellent scout like Victor, so if they wanted to open the way, they could only shoot and clear all the way. Although it would attract zombies to gather at the shooting location, Carlos and his team kept moving, so their situation was not bad, and there was no sign of being surrounded by zombies. Suddenly, several pistol shots rang out, and Carlos heard that it was the sound of a Glock 17 pistol, which meant that there were living people. Regardless of whether they were rescue targets or not, saving one person was also a good thing. "Captain, are we still going to the smoke?" Pold asked, holding a gun on guard. Carlos answered without hesitation, "The gunshots are not far away. Let's go to the place where the gunshots are heard first. It may be the sound of the rescue target fighting." The other three nodded, and no one suggested splitting up. The four ran in the direction of the gunshots, and soon saw someone running out of the restaurant next to them. He turned around and fired several more shots at the restaurant. After the gunshots, the man breathed a sigh of relief and put down his hand holding the gun. In order to prevent the other party from accidentally shooting themselves and others in a state of tension, Carlos and his men found a good cover before shouting to the other party, "Hey, people over there, we are the rescue team GIMZ." Normal people would not remember the emblems of each unit of their own army clearly, so Carlos did not report the name of the unit on his armband. The nerves of the man who fired the gun were tense. He turned around and looked at Carlos, and raised the weapon in his hand and aimed at him. Carlos' first reaction was to quickly retreat into the bunker. "Are you a rescue team?" Seeing Carlos's action, the other party realized that he was holding a gun in his hand, and quickly put it down and said, "Sorry." After leaning sideways and seeing the other party put down his weapon, Carlos came out and asked, "Have you solved the zombies in the restaurant?" "You found the rescue target so quickly." Shwerui behind Carlos looked at the man holding a G17 pistol in front of him and whispered to Pold beside him. Pold is a man who doesn't like to talk. He usually doesn't talk much. When he heard Shwerui's words, he just nodded and didn't show any joy on his face. "It's just been solved," the other party replied. Carlos and others came to the other side, took a look at the zombie with abnormal skin color that fell in the restaurant, and said, "Are you Ake Thompson?" Although he had seen Ake's photo, Carlos still confirmed it. Ake Thompson was stunned when he heard Carlos' words, and slowly replied, "My name seems to be Vincent." Carlos felt strange about the other party's words. He took out the photo of Ake Thompson sent to him by his boss, showed it to the other party, and said, "Seems. Is this you? You don't even remember your own name." "I lost my memory. It was probably because my helicopter crashed and hit my head," Ake said. "I couldn't remember anything after I woke up, but I saw someone in the town called me Vincent, so I..." Before Ake finished speaking, Carlos understood and said, "You are not Vincent. Vincent's hair is golden. You with brown hair are Ake Thompson." Because Vincent is the leader of Umbrella on this island, Luo Guang naturally told everyone in his own army some of Vincent's appearance characteristics. However, Luo Guang didn't care about Vincent's life or death, so Luo Guang didn't give his subordinates an order to capture Vincent alive. "Ake Thompson." Carlos' words made Ake react. He bent his waist and covered his head with his hands, seeming to be in pain. As the medical soldier of the team, Shwerui immediately went forward to check on Ake's condition. After a while, with Shwerui's help, Ake's headache finally subsided. He looked at Carlos and said, "I seem to remember something. I am indeed a private detective named Ake Thompson. It seems that a friend of mine commissioned me to investigate something on this island, but all this does not feel real to me." Ake finally recovered a small part of his memory, but the recovered memory made Ake at a loss for a while, and he did not have the sense of reality he had experienced. Shwerui said, "This situation will occur when you just recover your memory, just like you did something when you sleepwalked, but you felt it was not real after waking up." Ake nodded and asked, "Why do the survivors here call me Vincent?" Carlos said he didn't know, and said, "I don't know, but we should leave here first. The gunshots just now attracted the zombies." Ake looked around and saw those hideous zombies. He nodded and followed Carlos and the other four to the library not far away. The library is usually not crowded, and there is no food or other supplies. Therefore, no one will gather here when the zombies break out. This is a good opportunity for Carlos to ask Ake about his situation and collect intelligence. Shana was responsible for unlocking the door, and then Carlos and Pold rushed in together, while Shwerui was responsible for protecting Ake, who was still confused. "You are the rescue. You are the evil murderer Vincent." When the library manager heard someone knocking on the door, he poked his head out from behind the bookshelf to check the situation. He saw Carlos and the other man who came in with military rifles first. He couldn't help but feel happy, but Ake who came in later made him feel scared and screamed. "Who are you?" Ake looked at the short bald man who kept retreating and asked strangely. "What are you talking about? How can you not recognize me? I am the librarian here." The short bald man looked very terrified, raised his arms forward, waved his palms left and right, and kept muttering to Ake not to kill him. "He's not Vincent." Carlos interrupted the conversation between the two, protecting Ake, and said. "What? Don't be fooled by that murderer. He is Vincent. He said so himself." The librarian pointed at Ake behind Carlos and said. "Under what circumstances did he say he was Vincent?" Carlos wondered if Ake had stolen the name of Vincent, the leader of the island, during the investigation, which led to misunderstandings among the people on the island. When he was asking about the umbrella company on the island, the librarian answered, and suddenly stopped talking, his eyes turned, and then his tone changed, and he said with horror, "You are not a rescue team, you are in the same group with that cold-blooded murderer." After saying that, the administrator was not afraid of being shot by others, and ran away to the depths of the library without looking back. Zayuna wanted to chase him, but was stopped by Carlos. Carlos was worried that the other party was a spy of the umbrella company and wanted to lead everyone into a trap. "It seems that I was right. Ake should be using the name of the island's administrator to investigate the events on the island." The first half of the librarian's words just now made Carlos believe that his speculation was correct, so he told others. The coincidence made it hard for Zayuna to believe, and asked, "Is it possible that our information is wrong? Is he really not Ake? Look at Ake's reaction, does he look like he is pretending?" Carlos asked. When Shwerui relieved Ake's headache at the door of the restaurant, she was careful and checked the situation on Ake's head, saying, "Ake's head did suffer a heavy blow, at least temporary amnesia is possible." Ake watched the discussion of several people and was worried that they would be unfavorable to him, but there was a man named Pold behind him watching him, so he did not dare to act rashly. "Don't be led astray by the people here, they are all employees of Umbrella Corporation." Carlos' last words hit the teammates who were entangled in Ake's identity with a stick, awakening them who were still digging into the dead end. Indeed, Pold wiped the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead and answered calmly. "Ake." Carlos looked at Ake and said, "You are not Vincent, so don't doubt yourself." The guy's reaction just now was too strange. He didn't seem to want to talk about Umbrella. The strange turn in the librarian's words made Carlos firmly believe that the brown-haired man in front of him was Ake Thompson. The other people followed Carlos' words, thought about it, and nodded. The librarian did reveal a strange feeling. "Then we don't care about the librarian," Shwerui asked, "do we need to find him and tell him that we have established an evacuation point at the port?" "No, since the other party doesn't trust us, forget it." Carlos suspected that the other party's identity was not simple, so he shook his head and denied Shwerui's suggestion. "By the way, who are you?" Ake, who was in confusion because of his amnesia, only reacted at this time to ask Carlos and others about their identities. Carlos told the other party his mission. "So you were entrusted by my friend to rescue me." Carlos' words matched the little memory that AK had recovered. Carlos was about to answer when he heard an electric sound coming from the intercom on his shoulder. "What's going on?" Carlos asked, holding down the chat button. "A helicopter has come to the island. It's from Umbrella." Wang Shuhong and his teammates hid in the port, watching the helicopter flying to the town. "Umbrella, it may be a force to clean up the evidence. Be prepared for a gunfight." Carlos thought of the cleaners that his boss had mentioned to replace the USS and UBCS, so he reminded them. Got it. After contacting Carlos, Wang Shuhong began to contact the death squad. "You heard it too. Let's start evacuating to the port to meet up," Carlos said to the others. "Got it? What do I need to do?" Although there were still many things that he hadn't figured out, Ake also knew the urgency of the matter. "Follow us, don't shoot randomly," Pold said in a deep voice. After confirming that the magazines of the guns in their hands were full, the few people prepared to leave the library. Suddenly, there was a sound of a door lock opening. It was a door on the second floor that was opened by the librarian. After the librarian opened the door, he threw a book to the first floor with force, making a loud noise. Carlos didn't know what the other party was doing, but he immediately raised his gun with one hand and aimed at the open door on the second floor, and made a quiet command with the other hand. As for why he didn't aim at the librarian, it was because the other party was too short, and the fence just blocked the other party's body, and after throwing the book away, the librarian ran away. "What's the situation?" Ake was very surprised by the librarian's behavior, so he asked Shwerui beside him. Shwerui didn't answer, but made a gesture of silence. Although he didn't know what was in the room that the other party opened, Carlos saw a clue from the other party's action of throwing things and making sounds. The characteristics of listening to the sound and identifying the location were very consistent with the biochemical monster that Carlos had seen before the liquor. Because the sound was only once, the monster in the room did not rush out of the room immediately and attack the place where the book fell. Everyone was alert and heard strange footsteps. It was a liquor walking out of the room slowly. Carlos did not shoot immediately, but waited for a few seconds. After confirming that there was only one liquor in front of him, Carlos raised his hand and quickly touched the small grip of the assault rifle, which was also a signal to the two people behind him to attack. Except for Pold at the end of the team and Ake, who was stunned by the hideous face of the liquor, the other three people shot almost at the same time. There was no thrill, and the liquor that appeared was shot into a sieve. "What is that?" Ake turned around and felt that he had seen the monster before. "The liquor's characteristic is to hunt based on sound, so don't make any noise." Carlos, who looked nonchalant, changed the new magazine and said, "Okay, let's leave quickly. I originally planned to post all the upper, middle, and lower parts at once, but failed. And the proofreading software exceeded the word limit for today.